the chronological gulf between the old Rig Veda and the new Rig Veda. I have analyzed the huge mass of names, and those names, cover almost every hymn in book 1, 8, 9, and 10, and almost in 8, 9, and 10, and a huge percentage of the hymns in book 1 and 5. And they are found only in the new books, they're missing in the old Rig Veda. So even if there are layers within each book, those layers are not different from each other. Especially in book 5, for example, you find the geographical names or the names of particular people. They are spread out throughout the book 5, including in the older hymns as well as the redacted hymns. And that is the only main distinction within the family books. There are old hymns and there are redacted hymns which were modified and changed all the time. So they exhibit a later linguistic state. But in spite of that, all the hymns in book 5 come in the late stage. See, there are 10 families of rishis in the Rig Veda. There are Vishwamitra, Vasishtas, Angirasas. There are 3 branches: Bharadwajas, Dirghatamasas, and Vamadevas. So, no, not Vamadevas, I mean Gautamas. Now, then there are Bhrigus, then there are Kashyapas. There are 10 families in all, or rather 9 priestly families and 1 family, which is actually the kings from the Bharatapuru dynasty who became rishis and composed hymns. Today we are going to speak about the Dasharatne battle, which is one of a series of Bharatapuru battles which are recorded in the Rig Veda. Now, why is the Rig Veda important? More important than any other source for deciding ancient Indo-Aryan, Indo-Iranian, and Indo-European history. That is because it is the oldest recorded text in the whole world. Its earliest parts go back beyond 3000 BC. And its latest parts range from 2000 to 1500 BC. It has 1028 hymns and 10,552 verses. So it is a huge reservoir of ancient data. But what is the value of this data? Because it is so ancient, in some ways, that will also hamper the discussion of our examination of the data. So, to what extent can it help us to reconstruct or understand the details of Vedic history? Now, this question is important because many people often raise 2 kinds of questions on whatever I have written. First is they pick out some name or some event recorded in the Rig Veda and they ask me what is the context of it and try to ask me how it can be related to what I have written. The second thing is that they try to pick up things from the Puranas and somehow connect it to the Rig Vedic history because many people are obsessed with showing that the Puranas give us the full history of ancient India. So, for that reason, I have to explain what is the value of the Rig Vedic data, why is it important as compared to other sources of data. Now, to give an example, today, as I said, as I've written that we have film songs, bhajans, abhangs, and kritis, which gives us the names of people rescued or helped by the gods. For example, to give just one example, in the film Nastik, there is a song, Kaun Chhuega Uski Parchai Re, Jisko Bachane Wala Sai. And in that, there is a whole list of names given of people who have been helped by Vishnu or Krishna. For example, Dhruva, Prahlad, and also an elephant whose leg is caught in the river. It is caught in the grip of a crocodile. And it appeals to Vishnu for help, and Vishnu comes down and rescues the elephant from the crocodile. Now, all of you must be aware of so many film songs, bhajans, abhangs, and kritis, which deal with all these people who are appealed to the gods, to Vishnu, Krishna, Ram, or maybe even to Shiva, Devi, or to Vithala, for example, in Maharashtra. And the gods come to their help. Now, what is we immediately recognize the context behind these names. For example, they just mentioned Dhruva or Prahlad, and they don't have to give the context also. We immediately know what they are. Sometimes they give clues. You saved Prahlad from the fire so that it did not burn him. Or you saved Draupadi from being humiliated by being disrupted in public. So even if those contexts are not given, still we know the context because we know the stories behind these names. Because the stories are much older. They are recorded in the Puranas, epics, and other traditional texts. And we are already aware of them. And for someone who is not aware of the particular story, he can always go and check it up in the old text. But in the case of the Rig Veda, this is not possible because the Rig Veda is the oldest text. There are no older records giving us the details and context of the names given in the text unless the Rig Veda itself gives them. So we are left clueless. This is a problem because when the Rig Veda gives us names of people who are helped by the gods, we just know that they have been helped by the gods. And if some context is mentioned in a few words, we understand that. But we don't know the full story behind it because no older records survive giving us the details of these stories. Now, in the Rigvedic times, the composers knew the full context and the story, and the listeners who heard the hymns being recited, they also knew the full context and story. So they did not require a full details to be told to them. For example, now when we hear the name of Draupadi being saved, or Prahlada being saved, or Dhruva being saved, or anyone, we know the story. So just the name alone brings the whole story in front of our eyes. So that was the case in the Rigvedic times. Unfortunately, we do not know all those stories because the Rigveda is the oldest text. So we are often left clueless as to what those incidents are or who those people are. We just know what the Rigveda tells us. Now the Rigveda consists of two types of references. Now, like all these modern bhajans and all, there are people who appeal to the gods for help when they're in distress, and the gods come to their help. It's Vishnu, Ram, Vithala, whatever. But in the Rigveda, it is the Ashwin who always come to the help of those who are in distress. So it is in the Ashwin hymns that you find long list of people who are helped in some way or the other by the Ashwin. For example, so many people, the Bhujyu, who is stranded somewhere in the middle of the ocean, the Ashwin go and rescue him. Many people are stranded in pits, or there is Vajrimati, the wife of an important person. The Ashwins bless them so that her husband is able to give her a child. Then there are people who can't find husband or wives, and the Ashwins help them to find husband and wives. There is Vishpala who loses her leg. The Ashwins gave her a metal leg instead, so that she can even run by using that leg. So there are all kinds of a long list of such things. This is one kind of data that we get about the people who are helped by the Ashwins. Now, this does not help us in any reconstruction of history. It helps us to know the lore of the Vedic times. But even that we know only as far as the Rigveda tells us. If it mentions a name and gives just 2-3 words of explanation, we know only that much. We don't know the detailed story. Now, the same thing happens. There are other type of references in the Rigveda are names of enemies destroyed by Indra for the sake of certain heroes or protagonists of the Rigveda. Now, this is a totally different category. Here, there is no help in or rescue. It is Indra battles for them and kills the enemies. That is, when the enemies are killed and destroyed by the heroes, it is attributed to Indra. Now, again, the same problem is there, except for the names and sometimes single clues. We do not have any details to reconstruct any history from these references. Most of these names and events have been totally forgotten by the time the Puranas and even the later Vedic texts were composed. And a few names appear which are contain later fabricated stories having no actual connection with the possible events of Rigvedic times. Now, some people insist, that if it is given in the Purana, it must be true. So, I will give one example. Now, in the Indra destroys enemies, but there are two types of enemies here. One is Indra is the thunder god who brings rain, and he fights against demons of the atmosphere who try to prevent the rainfall. And the main demon in the Rigveda is Vritra. Now, Vritra means it is derived from the root Vrit, which means to encircle. So, Vritra is a demon who encircles the rain cloud like a serpent. In fact, he is supposed to be in the form of a serpent, a great serpent, and he prevents the rainfall. So, Indra attacks him with his thunderbolt, the Vajra, and kills him. There is a big fight in the sky, and he finally destroys Vritra. Each time, there is not only one Vritra, and then the rain comes. So this is the origin of the myth. It is a nature myth. It does not have anything to do with any actual battles on the earth in human history. But now what has happened is this same story has been transported to other Indo-European mythologies, and it has lost the natural element. It has become humanized. Thus, in Greek mythology, the thunder god of Greek mythology is Zeus, and he kills the great serpent Typhoeus. That is his main deed. In Teutonic or Germanic mythology, Thor is the thunder god, and he destroys the great serpent of Midgard. Now, none of them retain memories of the nature origin of this myth. When in Hittite mythology, there is a weather god. His name is not given, but he is being harassed by a great serpent. So he tells another god to go and destroy that serpent. And that other god, whose name is Inara. So clearly it is Indra. He goes and destroys that great serpent. So now here you have the same thing. They have forgotten that Indra himself is the thunder god. And they remember that it's something to do with the weather. So it has retained some elements. Then finally we have the Iranian mythology, where Indra has been demonized. Indra is a demon in the Avesta. But Indra's epithet, Vritrahan or Vritragna, destroyer of Vritra, which later comes to mean also destroyer of enemies. That has become that name has become deified into the name of a deity, Vritsagna. Vritragna becomes Vritsagna, and he is the god of victory. And one of the main things he does is he removes obstacles to the way. So there also that myth has continued. So now the thing is that in the Vedic text itself, this nature myth gets forgotten in later Vedic texts. And then there is a story that there is a god called there is a Vedic god called Twashtra. Now his son Vishwarupa is killed by Indra. Because of that, he decides to create a powerful person who will kill Indra. So he creates this Vritra. And then Vritra and Indra battle it out, and Indra kills Vritra. That is the story. But when you go further in the Mahabharata, there is one new element. This Vritra has now become a Brahmin. Now, you know, in many stories in the Ramayana and Mahabharata, like for example, the Shambhuka story or the story of the dog in the Valmiki Ramayana, you know, the writers who are Brahmins have introduced certain elements showing special privileges for the Brahmins. So now in this particular story in the Mahabharata, because Indra kills a Brahmin, so he incurs a sin and he gets some disease, skin disease or something, so that he like a leper, for example, and he goes into hiding. When he goes into hiding, the gods are desperate because they require someone to sit on the throne of the king of the Devas. So they can't find Indra anywhere. So then they decide to set up a human being, a man called Nahusha. Now again we have here Nahusha is a name mentioned in the Rig Veda, but there is no context with this story. You know, in the Puranas they just pick up names from many times. They pick up names from the Rig Veda and then they new fabricated stories are added about them. So in this story, Nahusha is a very virtuous, powerful, and very intelligent king. So they decide he will be perfect to take the place of Indra. But when he becomes a king, he becomes arrogant. And he starts, as time passes, he becomes more and more arrogant. And he wants all the rishis to take him on a palanquin. And then when they're not going fast enough, he kicks one of the rishis. So the rishi immediately curses him and he turns him into a snake. So then finally he turns out Indra again. He expiates his sin in some way and he becomes the king of the gods again. Now this story has absolutely no connection with the Vritra of the Rig Veda. So if we try to backdate this story onto the Rig Veda, it would make no sense. In spite of the fact that the Rig Veda gives us details about the nature myth, still that myth has become so completely changed by the time of the later books. So when the Rig Veda gives us certain names and it does not give us details, then we can imagine how much more that story will become distorted or how much more stories will be fabricated concerning those names. Now, except for these names and often single clues, we do not have any details to reconstruct any history from these references. Most of these names and events have been forgotten by the time of the Puranas, and a few appear in fabricated stories. So, although the Rig Veda contains plenty of information on battles and heroes and people who are destroyed by Indra, it does not help us to reconstruct Vedic history for the simple reason that we have no context and no stories beyond those few words which are mentioned in the Rig Veda. There are no older texts to give us the full story, and the later texts have already distorted and changed the story. So by and large, that is why the Rig Veda, in spite of having so much data, it is not very easy to reconstruct history from it, with one exception. They are the more detailedly recorded Bharata Kuru battles. They are the ones which are important, and they are the ones I am dealing with in this talk. Now, everyone knows the most famous historical story in ancient pre-Buddhist India, the Mahabharata war. It was fought between two clans of the Kuru Bharatas, who were a branch of the Kurus. Now, and all the kingdoms of North India are supposed to have participated in this, right from Bihar and Bengal to Afghanistan and Maharashtra. So, the events of the Mahabharata and also of the Ramayana are so well known that people know all about the characters in these stories, all the stories associated with them, and you find these stories depicted even in the temples of Southeast Asia more than 1,000 years ago. The Hindu temples and even the Buddhist temples of Southeast Asia and other places where Buddhism also spread. So these are very well known to the Indians, but very few know much more about the ancient earlier battles fought by the Purus in the Vedic times. Because even the later Vedic and Puranic texts are blank about these events. Why are they blank? Because out of hundreds of battles mentioned in the Rig Veda, there is no particular reason to think that these battles were more important. So they did not keep the memories of the details of these other battles. However, these three Bharata Puru battles are important because they are given in detail in the Rig Veda. And these battles are important events from the point of view of modern history because it tells us about Indo-European and particularly Indo-Iranian history and the history of world civilization in India. Now the Bharata Purus, who lived mainly in Haryana, remember this, they were a subtribe of the Kurus. The Bharata Purus, wars of the Rig Veda span many generations of kings of a clan descended from ancestral Bharata, and which included many important kings like Devavata, Srinjaya, Divodasa, Sudas, Sahadeva, and Somaka. Many generations separated Sudas from the earlier and later kings. Some people think Sudas is the son of Divodasa and he's the father of Sahadeva. That is not so. Srinjaya is the father of Divodasa and Sahadeva is the father of Somaka. Beyond that, all these kings have many generations separating them. Now, the Rig Veda in its old books, that is books 6, 3, 7, 4 and 2, was a book of the Bharata Purus. And by the time of the new books, 5, 1, 8, 9, 10, it was a book of the Kurus in general. And the kings of this dynasty were the heroes and protagonist kings of the old books, that is 6, 3, 7, 4, 2. So every single reference to the word Bharata is found only in the old books, except for one reference in book 1, which is by the Kutsas. And the Kutsas are important because they continue that tradition of the Kuru-Bharata war, Bharata Puru wars, as I will be showing. Now the Rig Veda describes many battles, but the references to them are so vague, ambiguous, and skimpy that we cannot derive any historical data from them. But the battles fought by the Bharatas at the time of Srinjaya, Sudha, and Sahadev Somaka stand apart because they form a very important continuum of events which led to the emigration of the last 4 Iranian branches of Indo-European. Indo-European languages have 12 branches. One of them is Indo-Aryan, and 4 others are the 4 others according to linguists. After all the other branches had departed from the homeland, 5 branches were remaining in the homeland in the end. They were Indo-Aryan, Iranian, Armenian, Greek, and Albanian. Now, it is surprising that in these battles you find these very 5 groups who are named in the battles of the Bharata Purus. The Bharata Purus, of course, themselves are the Indo-Aryans. They represent the Indo-Aryan branch. And the Iranians, Armenians, Greeks, and Albanians, that is their linguistic ancestors, are represented by the Anus. I don't know if you know that Puranas have classified them as 5 tribes. The Druhyus, Anus, Purus, and the Yadus and Turvasus to the south. So the Anus were the ancestors of the Iranian, Armenian, Greek, and Albanian tribes, and the Purus were the ancestors of Indo-Aryan. Now, why is this so important from the point of view of world history? Because 46% of the world speaks Indo-European languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, Hindustani, Persian, etc. as a first language alone. Then, of course, another 25-30% at least speak it as a second language. Those whose mother tongues may not be Indo-European, they also know English, Hindustani, Persian, or some other language like Russian, Spanish. So the records of these battles provide us with the only recorded evidence in the world of the Indo-European homeland and migration. Otherwise, there is speculation that they went from South Russia, and then they make up all stories about how they went out and where they went out. They try to find evidence for these things, but they think that it is not recorded anywhere. However, this last stage of the migrations of the Indo-Europeans from their homeland is recorded in the Rig Veda. The Bharatapura battles, there were three historical battles. First was the Battle of Haryupiya in Haryana at the time of Srinjaya. The second was the Battle of Ten Kings in the Punjab, the most important of the numerous battles of Siddharth. And the third is the Varshagera battle in Afghanistan at the time of Sahadev and Somaka. Now here you see the progressive westward shifting from Haryana to the Punjab, from Punjab to Afghanistan, where the Purus, Bharata Purus, are fighting the Anus, that is the Proto-Iranians and others. And after each battle, the Anus or Proto-Iranians and others have shifted further and further westward till they are in Afghanistan at the time of the third battle. And that is where the Avesta was composed, the oldest Iranian text. Now these battles are important because they show that westward shift, and it also shows that the Anus were originally in Haryana, and then finally they went to as far as Afghanistan. And the second important thing is that in the first battle, the Anus were allies of the Bharata Purus. It is only in the second, when they were in Haryana. But as time progressed, by the time of Siddharth, they were in the enemy ranks. And the next two battles have them as the main enemy. Now, to understand Vedic history, we must first get out of the false belief that the Rig Veda, the oldest Vedic text, is the ancestral text of ancestral text of all the people of India. It is not. It is a text only of the Purus of Haryana, as they later spread out slightly into Punjab and western UP. Now, in the period of the old books, 6, 3, 7, 4, and 2, it was a text of the Bharata Purus sub-tribe of the Purus. But later it became a more general Puru book. Now, the Purus were just one of the many Indo-European tribal conglomerates of North India. They were settled 11 branches which migrated out of India. They were to the west of the Purus. And to the east and south of the Purus were the other branches, the Yadus, Turvasus, and Ikshwakus, who spoke other Indo-European dialects which were not derived from Rigvedic, but which were also Indo-European dialects. Later in time, as Vedic culture spread, they were completely influenced by the Vedic language, and then they all merged together. But to begin with, they were not part of the Vedic stream. Now, as I said, I just explained it. I think the Yadus and Turvasus and to the south, they were to the south of the Purus. They were in southwestern UP and areas south, that is extending perhaps up to Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra. The Anus were to the north and west of the Purus in the Punjab and areas further north, and the Druhyus in northeastern Punjab and further areas. Originally, the Druhyus were in Punjab, but in earlier pre-Rigvedic times, they were driven out further west into northwesternmost Punjab and Afghanistan. And later, of course, after the Dasharatni war, the Anus spread into those areas, and the Druhyus were further driven out into Central Asia and beyond. Now, the Ikshwakus to the east of the Purus are another group. Now, they are not part of the 5 tribes, which are considered Luna tribes. They are part of the Solar tribes to the east. So, further east and south were the Austric and Dravidian language speaking people. So, all these different people were there, of which the Vedic people were only the Purus, and originally the Bharata Purus. Now we will deal with those battles. The first battle is the Haryupiya battle. This is the first of the historical Bharata Puru battles, and it took place in Haryana at the time of Srinjaya, the father of Divodasa. It is described in Book 6, in hymn 6.27. This battle took place on the banks of the Yavyavati and Haryupiya, 2 sister tributaries of the Saraswati. In this, the Anus and the Purus, Bharata Purus, were allies. The Anus were led by Abhyavarti and Chayamana, who belonged to the Parthava or Parthian sub-tribe of Anus, and the Srinjaya, who was the king of the Bharata Purus. So they were allies in this battle, and they jointly defeated the Turvasus and Yadus, who were the enemies in this particular battle. This battle is important. It would not have been important otherwise. It is important only because it shows that in the earliest period, the Bharata Purus and the Anus were allies. in contrast with the situation in later times. Also, it explains early references to Haryana, that is Lake Manusha, which is in Haryana. It is mentioned in the Avesta. That is the only importance of the Haryapya battle. Next one. Also, it tells us that Abhyavartin Chayaman was a Parthava, which is important when we are analyzing the Dasharatna battle. Now, the battles of Sudas. We talk only about the Dasharatna battle, but actually, Sudas fought many battles both to the east and the west. And these battles are described in two books of the Rig Veda, Book 3 and Book 7. Now, Book 3 is the earlier book because it was at that time Vishwamitra was the priest of Sudas. And in Book 7, it was Vasishtha who was the priest of Sudas. He was replaced by, Vishwamitra was replaced by Vasishtha. Now, many people from this, and by many people, I mean most scholars, have converted this into a battle between Vishwamitra and Vasishtha, the Dasharatna. But it is not so, because once Vishwamitra ceased to be the priest of Sudas, he faded from this particular scene. He is not an enemy of Sudas in any way. Now, in Book 3, the book of the Vishwamitra, two big events are described. First, 3.33 shows the Bharatapurus and the Sudas expanding westwards, crossing the Vipash and Sutudri rivers. Now, there is no battle described here. They just have to overcome the turbulence of the rivers which they are crossing, and Vishwamitra quietens the waters of the rivers so that they are able to pass. So that is the greatness of Vishwamitra in this case. It is not a battle. And this took place first. And perhaps by that time, Sudas had not even thought of conquering everywhere. Because the hymn tells us that the reason why Sudas crossed these two rivers and went westward is in quest of Soma. Soma, which was grown in northwesternmost parts of present-day Pakistan and in Afghanistan and Central Asia. So, Soma was known to the people of to the Rigvedic people of the old books. But it was a very rare thing, like, Indian spices were known to Europeans and they were taken there from here. So, when there was a shortage of those spices, the Europeans had to try and find a route to India to get, to acquire these spices and to take possession of the spice fields and all that. So, in the same way, Sudas and the Bharatapurus, Soma was a very rare ingredient from the northwest. So, in this, Sudas actually tried to cross the rivers so that he could move further into the lands of Soma and acquire Soma. Now, the second hymn, 353, describes the great yatna undertaken by the Vishwamitra for Sudas, after which a horse is released, so that Sudas can conquer east, west, and north and gain riches. That is what the hymn tells us. Now, remember, there are no specific battles and victories are mentioned here. Vishwamitra had helped them cross the rivers and he had helped them perform the yajna. But apparently, after this, he failed to achieve any concrete results, which must have made Sudas replace him with Vasishtha as his priest. So there is no conflict as such. It is just that he found a better priest to conduct his battles. Now, this saga continues in Book 7, the book of the Vasishthas, which deals with all the battles of Sudas. Now, there are three hymns, 18, 33, and 83 are the main hymns, especially 18, which deal with the battles of Sudas. And there are supplementary references in hymn 19 and 9, also already mentioned 33, and the post-battle references in hymn 5 and 6, hymns 5 and 6. Now, the hymns deal with Sudas's battle in the east, mainly around the banks of the river Yamuna. And his great battle, the Dasharatna, is in the west, on the banks of the river Parushni, the third and central river of the Punjab. So there are two different campaigns. The eastern ones are on the Yamuna, and the western ones are on the Parushni in the Punjab. Now, as we see the names of the enemies, you will notice that the enemies on the east are tribes which can be recognized as purely Indian, even in the post-Rigvedic scenario, or the names are clearly Vedic Sanskrit names. But the western ones in the Dasharatna, in sharp contrast, are tribes which either are not found afterwards in the Rigveda or in any other Indian text, or they're directly identifiable with the names of ancient Iranian, Armenian, Greek, and Albanian tribes. Now, the battle hymn 7:18 refers to the eastern as well as the western battles of Sudas. So, the eastern battles are referred to in hymns 18 to 20, and also in verses 6 and 13. Now, verse 19 makes it clear that these battles took place on the Yamuna. 18, 19, 20, and verse 19 makes it clear that these battles took place on the Yamuna. Now, the enemies in these eastern battles are Bheda, Ajal, Shigrus, and Yakshus, Devaka Manyamana, Urvasha, Yakshu, and Matsya, and perhaps also the ambiguous reference to Purus in 30. Now, it will be seen that these Purus means the non-Bharata Purus to the east, because there were other non-Bharata Purus to the east. Now, it will be seen that these eastern names are very much Indian even in post-Rigvedic times and are not connected with the names of latter-day Iranian or other Indo-European tribes. But when we come to the western battles, it is a totally different story. Now we come to the western opponents of Sudas in the Dasharagna battle, which takes place in the central area of the Punjab. Yeah. Now these western opponents of Sudas in the Dasharagna battle. Now 783.1 names Dasas, the Pruthus Parthavas and Parshus Parshavas among the opponents of Sudas. All the others are named in hymn 7.18. In verse 5, the Shimyus. In verse 6, the Bhrugus and Druhus. In verse 7, Alinas, Paktas, Dhalanas, Shivas, and Vishanins. Kavi Chayamana is named in verse 8. He is the king of the enemy Anu coalition. Kavi Chayamana. Then in verse 11, you have the Vaikarnas. And in verse 12, you have Kavasha and Druhu. Now Kavasha, again, is the priest. Just as Kavi Chayamana is the king of the coalition, Anu coalition, Kavasha, old Kavasha, he is described as a very old and revered priest of the Anu coalition. Now, it will be seen that all these names, most of them missing in later Indian literature. Now, of course, we have Bhrugus, etc. in a separate context, but I have given complete details on the Bhrugus in my books, so I will not go into all that here. Now, all these are identifiable with the names of later historical Iranian, Armenian, Greek, and Albanian tribes, or are found in the Iranian Avesta. The exodus westward after this battle is referred to in 7.5.3 and 7.6.3. Now, what are these Iranian tribes of later times? In Afghanistan, in the Avesta, you find Sairima, that is the Shimyu, Dahi, that is the Dasa, Vaikarata, that is Vaikarnas. In northeastern Afghanistan, after the Avesta, in later times, you find the northeastern Afghanistan and the northernmost Pakistan, you find the Nuristani or Pishatin languages, who are the Vishanin. In Pakhtunistan, northwest Pakistan and South Afghanistan, you find the Pakhtun or Pashtu, that is the Pakhta in this battle. In Baluchistan, in southwest Pakistan and southeast Iran, you find the Bolan or Baluchi people, the Bhalanas. In northeastern Iran, you find the Parthian or Parthava, that is the Puthu Parthava. So the Parthian Empire was in northeastern Iran. In southwestern Iran, you find the Persian Empire, that is the Persua or Persian. That is Parshu and Parshava in the Rigveda. Now in northwestern Iran, you also find the Madras, an Anu tribe not actually named in the Baki hymn, and they are still found in India, a group of them, even in post-Rigvedic times. However, one group of them departed westwards along with the other tribes and became the Medians, the Mede or the Medians, who are called Madai in Iranian. In Uzbekistan, we have the Khivas, that is Shiva, or Khwarezmians. In West Turkmenistan, we have the Dahai, that is the Dasas. And in Ukraine and South Asia, you have the Alan, Alina, and Sarmatian Shimyu. Alan and Sarmatian are very important historical tribes. They are the Alina and the Shimyu. Now, the Thraco-Phrygian or Armenian branch. In Turkey, you find the Frigay or Phrygian, also known as Brigay in the earliest references. They are the Bhrugu of this battle. And in Romania and Bulgaria, you find the Dacian or Dacian tribes, which are the Dasas. They are Thraco-Phrygian or Armenian tribes. In Greek tribes of later times, you find the Hellenids. That is, the Greeks themselves were called Hellenids, and that they are the Alina. Now, some people think this is a far drawn, but it is not, because Alina is a non-Rigvedic word. In Rigveda, there were very few words with love, and this word Alina is not found anywhere after the Rigveda, and it is found in the Rigveda also only in this one battle hymn of the Dasharagna, after which they move out of India and they are ever gone out of sight from India until they returned many, many centuries later or millenniums later as the Greeks. And then you have in Albania, you have the Sirmio or Sirmium, that is a Shimyu. Now these people, this word also Shimyu is found only twice in the whole of the Rig Veda, and it is never found after that. And it is found also, I mean, this name proves the westward migration, because the first time they mentioned is in the Dasharatna battle, and the second time in Punjab, and the second time they mentioned is in the Varshagera battle, which takes place in Afghanistan. So by that time, they have already moved to Afghanistan, and after that, of course, they move on till West Asia and Europe. Now, there are two more Avesta names. That is Kavasha, the old priest of the Anu coalition. He is named in the Avesta. He the same name is found in the Avesta as Kausha. And Kavi, the king leader of the Anu coalition, is also there as Kavi in the Zend Avesta. Now, all these tribes, please remember, are located in the Punjab at the time of the Dasharatna. And in later historic times, they are found in a continuous belt. If you check the earlier slide which I have given, you will see that they start with Afghanistan in the Avesta, Afghanistan and Baluchistan and Pakhtunistan in the post-Avestan times. Then they go to northeastern Iran, northwestern Iran, southeastern Iran and southwestern Iran. Then they are found in Turkey. They are also found in Kyrgyzstan. They are found in many parts of southeastern and eastern Europe. So there is a continuous belt that they are found in later times. And in this battle, they have found all of their ancestors are found in the Dasharatna battle, which took place in the Punjab, after which they migrated westward. Now remember this, it's not, like there are, for example, certain Indian scholars are known for picking out words and then trying to draw connections between the Indian words and foreign words. But remember, these are not stray words that you have picked out from somewhere in the different parts of the text. These are all names which are found in just 6 verses from 2 hymns. Out of the 1028 hymns and 10,552 verses of the Rig Veda. And all these names pertain to a single historical event. They cannot all be coincidentally cognate names. Means if you refuse to accept that Alinas or Helenes or something, it's extremely strange that all these names should be so exactly cognate to these last tribes of Indo-European linguistic history. And the thing is that many of these correspondings have been accepted even by the Western scholars. Like Kavasha and Kavi are known to be Iranian names. Witzel has accepted in many of his papers that Bhalana refers to the Baluchis and that Pakhta refers to the Pakhtuns. So you see, all this is not stories made up. It is very, very concrete and concise evidence in a small particular part of the Rig Veda. Now, all the above named historical Iranian tribes, particularly the islands and Sarmatian. Now you will notice there are many historical Iranian tribes which are not named in these tribes. But among these, the islands and Sarmatians include the linguistic ancestors of almost all other, because they spread far and wide, the islands and Sarmatians. And they include the linguistic ancestors. You can check in Wikipedia or elsewhere. Islands and Sarmatians are the ancestors of modern Iranian groups not named above, such as the Scythians or Shakas, the Ossetic people, the Kurds, and even the presently Slavic-speaking people, but formally they used to speak Iranian languages, the Serbs, Croats, Bulgarians, and others. So you see, it practically covers not only the full geographical belt from Punjab to southeastern and eastern Europe, but it covers practically all the Iranian tribes known to history, almost all. We also see here an important historical phenomenon of the trail of names. When a tribe migrates from area A to area C, in the middle it passes through area B. Now, all the people from that tribe don't migrate. A group of them migrate. So you sometimes find the name in both A as well as C, and you find it sometimes in A, B as well as C areas in later historical times. Now here we see the same names found in different parts of the route from Punjab to southeastern and eastern Europe. For example, the name Alina. They are the Anu Alinas in Punjab. Then you have the Iranian Alans found over most of West Asia, and then you have the Greek Helene found in southeastern Europe, the Greeks. Then the name Shinyu, you find it in the Punjab, in the battle. In the Avesta in Afghanistan, you find the Sairima. In later Iranian times, you find the Sarmatians or Sarmaha, who are spread out all over West Asia. And later you find the Sirmio or Sirmium in Albania and southeastern Europe. A full trail of the same name going forward. And then you find the Bhrugu or Atharvan. The Iranian priests are known as Atharvan. And the Thracophrygian tribe, the Brigade or Frigate. Then you find the Anu Madra in Punjab. They remain even after the battle. And in fact, they are not mentioned in the battle. But we know they also migrated westward because we have the only Iranian tribe which is not named there, that is the Madas or Medians, and they are the Madras. And finally, Anu Dasa, Avestan Dahi, Iranian Dahe, and Thraco-Phrygian Dacian or Dacian. Now, you will notice that in each of these cases, the original people in Punjab spoke the Anu language, which must have been very close to the Puru language. But as they moved westwards, one group migrated, for example, the Alinas, migrated all the way to Greece, and their language developed into the Greek Hellenic branch. Already it was a different branch, and the original language was retained by the people who went furthest. And those who remained on the way in West Asia, they were absorbed into the Iranians. So the name Alan remained, but a language became Iranian, just as the language of the remainder Anus in India became Indo-Aryan after the Anus had passed away. Similarly, Shimyu, sorry, same one. Similarly, Shimyu are also Indo-Aryans. In Avesta and Iranians, they are the groups which remained on the way and became absorbed in the Iranians. And those who went furthest were the Albanians, the Sirmiyo or Sirmium. They retained their original language. And that is the same case with all the others. Now, this is the last of the historical, this is now if we come to the third battle, third group of Bharatapuru battles, the Varshagera battle. Now, this is the last of the historical Bharatapuru battles. It took place in Afghanistan during the time of Sahadeva and Somaka, who are descendants of Sudas. And they are described or referred to in books 1 and 4. That is in hymn 1.100 and in verse 4, 30.18. And Somaka and Sahadeva also referred to in hymn 4.15 because they are the kings during the time of book 4. Now the importance of this battle is, it represents the culmination of the Bharatapuru westward thrust and the migration of the Iranians. Secondly, it is also a battle recorded and remembered on both the sides. The previous battles are remembered only in the Rig Veda. And this battle is forgotten in other later Indian traditions, but it is remembered in the Iranian records, in the Avesta and even far later traditions recorded in the Shahnameh. And finally, its continuity with the Dasharagna is reconfirmed by the reference to the Shimyus, who are found referred to in 718.5 and 100.18. That is the Varshagera battle hymn. And they are not referred to anywhere else in any Vedic or later record. So this battle is a continuation of the Dasharagna battle. Now, unlike the Dasharagna references, the Varshagera references do not give details of the names of the Anu enemies, except the Shinyus. The Shinyus are mentioned in both, so we know that they are a continuation of the Anu enemies. But they name Arana and Chitraratha as enemies killed beyond the Sarayu. That is, they don't name the Indian side, but they name the enemies Arana and Chitraratha, and they are described as Aryas. That is, Arya is a word used in the Rig Veda for Purus only. So what this means is they were Bharata Purus or other Purus who had joined up with the opponents. So though they are killed by Indra for the sake of the Bharata Purus, they are still referred to as Arya. And it is emphasized that they were Aryas who were killed by Indra because they joined with the enemy forces. Now the 5 heroes of the hymn are mentioned: Rijrashva, Sahadeva, Suradhas, Ambarisha, and Bhayaman. And another important word in this battle is Grama, which is a special name for the troops of the Varshagiras. The Varshagiras are the 5 heroes that I just named, Rijrashva, etc. Now, as many of these names are cryptic, a little analysis is required to decipher them, but we have clear clues from the Rig Veda and the Iranian records. The Arana and Chakraratha are recorded as Aryas, that is Bharata Purus who fought from the enemy side. Now, the Avesta records an Indo-Aryan hero who fought on the Iranian side. He is known as Manush Chitra. It is a modern name which has become Minochair. You may have heard many Parsis with the name. Now, the Pahlavi text describes as him as being born near the Manusha of Yash 19.1. Yash 19.1 is a part of the Avesta. And we know that this lake is found in Haryana. So he was born in Haryana. He was a Bharatapuru, even according to the Avesta. And according to the Cambridge history of Iran, his name means from the race of Manu and refers to the ancient mythical figure Manu, son of Vivaswant, who was regarded in India as the first man. He has no place in Iranian tradition, where his role is played by Yima and later Gayumar. Now, Farwardin Yash refers to him as Manush Chitra, son of Ayuru. So there you have Chitra, son of Ayuru, that is Chitraratha, son of Arana. You have to stretch the Arana Ayuru connection a bit, but it's again it would be too much of a coincidence that these two names match so well. Now, Rijirashtra is directly identified because the Iranian traditions distinctly remember him as the main leader of the Turanian enemy side in the conflict. In the Avesta, he is known as Arjataspa, and in later texts as Arjaspa, and everyone has identified this with Rijirashtra. Second name of the five is Sahadeva. He is also clearly identified. The Shahnameh chapter 462 records another main companion or brother of Arjataspa who led his troops from the rear. He is called Hushdev. Now this is Sahadeva, who in the Avestan language, the equivalent of Sahadeva would have been Hazadeva, which becomes Hushdev in the late Shahnameh. Next name Suradhas is more cryptic, but it is equally definite. It is clearly a family nickname for Sudas and his descendants. It means bountiful. Radhas means wealth, and so he has good wealth. And when is wealth good? When it is donated to others. So Sudas also means the same thing. Now, many people, wrongly take the name Sudas as Sudasa. It is not. Devo Dasa has the word Dasa in it. Sudas does not have the word Dasa. It is Sudas. And if you see the Rigveda, the name is not written with an S. It is Sudha and two dots, Sudha, which grammatically becomes Sudase, etc. in case form. So he is being regularly referred to as Sudas. So people think it is Sudasa. It is not. So his name also means giver. It is from the root Da, which means to give. So his name is exactly the same as Suradhas. So now we know Sudas is not there in the Varshagira battle. So it must be a name for his family members. Now Sahadeva is already named directly, so it must stand for Somaka, who is not directly named. Now you will think this is speculation, but look, in all the 6 family books, this word is found only in 2 hymns, 3.33 and 53 in Vishwamitra's book. It is a word coined by Vishwamitra to refer to Sudas and his clan. There are exactly the 2 hymns in book 3 which deal with the battles of Sudas. Not battles actually, his migration and his yajna. Now, his crossing the rivers and the yajna. Now, thrice it is found in book 4, which is the book of Somaka Sahadevya. So, in all the 6 family books, these are the only 2 places where the word Suradas is found. And after that, it is found in the new books in the meaning of good, bountiful giver. Now, it is found in these 2 battle hymns, and in the new books, it is found in the Varshagira battle hymn. So, again, the connection is there, like the word Shimyu. Now, the Avestan, the Abanyas refers to Arjatas along with his brother Humayaka, who is referred to as the worshipper of the Devas. Now, Humayaka is clearly Somaka because H becomes H in Avesta, in Iranian. Now, a Parsi scholar, E. Shahryarji, who has analyzed the Iranian Indo-Aryan battles in detail long ago, many decades ago, he also connects up Suradhas with Humayaka. We have connected him with different angles like Suradhas and Somaka, Humayaka. But he connects them because according to him, Suradhas and Humayaka on the ground, that both mean one with much wealth. Now, I don't know Avestan and I don't know Humayaka means that, but that is what this E. Shahryarji claims. So again, you see now that Suradhas in the Varshagir hymn, it clearly refers to Somaka. Now, Ambarish and Bhayaman are not found in similar forms in the Iranian records. And they are so these 2 names are not so immediately identifiable. Now, Ambarish, this is an aside, this is not part of the hymn. Ambarish is an Ikshvaku family name. And as the northwestern branch of the Ikshvakus were allies of the Bharata Purus, it is possible that they were northwestern Ikshvakus. But that is not pertinent here. Just remember that these 2 names are not found directly in the Avesta. But again, we have E. Shahryarji, who identifies them with 2 other family members of Arjataspa. Vidarshnik, a brother of Arjataspa, and Vandramaini, father of Arjataspa, who is named in the Abanyas with Arjataspa. Now, on the ground, that Ambarish and Vidarshnik both mean the one with beautiful garments, and Bhayaman and Vandramaini both mean the fearless one. So, how far you want to accept these translations is a different matter. But the thing is, the whole group of names fits in perfectly without any exception on some ground or the other. Again, if you want to call it a coincidence, then that is really special pleading. All these cannot be coincidences restricted to a few names found in a few hymns referring to certain fixed historical incidents. Now, finally, the word grama. Now, we know grama means village. In the Rigveda also, it means village almost everywhere. But in twice in the old books, once it means the troops of the Bharata Purus, and once it means village, the new meaning. That is in the old book 3. It refers to the Bharata Puru trips, 333.1, again that hymn of Vishwamitra, which refers to Sudas. It calls the Bharata Puru trips of under Sudas by the name Grama. In 2.12.7, which is a middle book, not an old book like 637, in that it is found in the new meaning of village. And afterwards in the new books, it is found once. Again, it is used for the Bharata Puru trips of Suhadeva in this Varshagira battle hymn. And otherwise it is found 10 times as village. So only twice it is used for the Bharata Puru troops. Once in the battle of Sudas, the Dasharatna, and not in the battle of Dasharatna, but it is referred to in the context of Sudas. And then again it is referred to in the context of Sahadeva, the descendant of Sudas. So now, what is the connection with this Grama? In the oldest part of the Avesta, Zarathustra, in Yasna 32:12-14, he refers to the Grama as the most powerful and persistent of his enemies. So you see, all the names are found recorded in both the Indian side as well as the Iranian side. So that is the difference between Sudas's eastern battles and his western battles. And they fit in with all the relevant details from Iranian records. Now, another thing, continuity you will notice is the Parthian kings, Haryana to Afghanistan. Now, the ancient Parthians, the Iranians consist of many tribes, Persians, Parthians, Medians, and then you have all these Alan Sarmatians, etc. later. Now, in the oldest book of the Rigveda, book 6, the leader of the Proto-Iranian Anus is Abhyavartin Chayamana, and in this hymn, he is called a Parthava or Parthian. And at that time, he is in Haryana. In book 7, during the Dasharatna battle, the leader of the Anu coalition is the king Kavi Chayamana, who is clearly a descendant of Abhyavartin Chayamana. So he is also a Parthian, and this time he is in the Punjab. And we know that Persians and Parthians are both referred to in the Dasharatna hymns also as among the enemies of Sudas. So we know that Kavi Chayamana is one of those Parthians. He is the king and the leader. Now in the Avesta, the royal dynasty of the Iranians, even at the time of Zarathustra, the king who was at the time of Zarathustra is Kavi Vishtas. So it is known as the Kavyan dynasty. In later texts it is called the Kayanian, but in the Avestan it is called Kavyan, descended from the ancestral king Kavi. So this is the ancestral king Kavi who was in the Dasharatna battle in the Punjab. Now this time, this royal dynasty of the Iranians is in Afghanistan. Again you see the movement of the Parthian dynasty from Haryana to Punjab to Afghanistan. Now, the Avesta does not say that the Kavyan dynasty is Parthian. But in later times, it is the Parthians who consistently claim that the Kavyan dynasty of the Avesta was a Parthian dynasty. So the emigration of the Iranians from the borders of Haryana to the mountains of Afghanistan, long before they entered Iran and Central Asia, is therefore a matter of record. Now the bigger picture. The Rigveda and other Vedic texts and the Puranas and epics refer to countless battles and wars. Most of them were local affairs and did not leave detailed traditional memories in the Indian side. The Bharatapuru battles were just such battles which did not leave details beyond the few hymns and verses which deal with them, and therefore they were forgotten by Indian tradition. However, they are extremely important to us in the modern context, particularly the Dasharatna and the Varshagira battles, because they provide us with actual recorded details about extremely crucial ancient events and help us to solve the biggest historical mystery of all time, the problem of the original homeland and the migrations of the speakers of the Indo-European languages. As I said, which are today spoken first languages to 46% of the population of the world. Now, as per the linguistic analysis of the Indo-European languages, there are 12 known branches which were settled in and around the original homeland, wherever it was. They claim it was the steppes, but they say that wherever this homeland was, whether it is the steppes or Anatolia or anywhere else, this is the order in which the branches started migrating out of that homeland. Now, the Anatolian, Hittite, and Tokharian branches in that order were the first to emigrate. Now, it is surprising that the Tokharian branch is found in Central Asia, and the Anatolian branch, Hittite branch, is found in Turkey in its first appearance in historical records. But it entered Turkey from the northeast. So obviously they also went from Central Asia. And the biggest proof of this is that the oldest sculpted representations of the Hittites in West Asia show them having Mongoloid features. So they could not have come from the steppes of that time. They obviously came from Central Asia into Turkey. So what the our Indian records tell us that they migrated into Central Asia and then migrated westwards into Turkey. While the Tokharians did not migrate at all, they remained in Central Asia till they became extinct 1,000 years ago. Now, the next to emigrate were the 5 European or northwestern branches: Italic, Celtic, Germanic, Baltic, and Slavic. Now, they passed through Central Asia all the way to Europe, through Siberia and the steppes. Finally, according to the linguists, only 5 last branches were left in the homeland: Albanian, Greek, Armenian, Thraco-Phrygian, and Iranian and Indo-Aryan. Now, this is what the linguists say, and we find it actually recorded in the names of the tribes in the Battle of 10 Kings in the Rig Veda. So, all this settles the issue of the geographical location of the original homeland once and for all. Now, there were 3 streams of migration of the Indo-European tribes and branches from India. The events of the Bharatapuru tribes led to the 3rd great migration of the 4 Anu last branches: Albanian, Greek, Armenian, and Iranian westward through Afghanistan into West Asia and beyond. That is, they adopted a southern route. But the first early migration was of the Anatolian and Tokharian branches, which migrated northwards from Afghanistan into Central Asia and settled down there for many centuries. Tokharian till it became extinct in the western and eastern parts of Central Asia, respectively. They are remembered in later Puranic traditions as the Uttaramadra and Uttar Kuru. And this is proved by the fact that Uttar Kuru contains the root Tokhru, which was the name of the Tokharians in many texts. And many linguists have commented on the fact, not on Uttar Kuru, but they have pointed out that Tokhru was the name of the Tokharians. Now, of course, some people dispute it, but there will always be people who dispute things. Now, detailed and conclusive evidence on all the migrations are given in greater detail in my books and blogs. Here I am only talking about these Bharatapuru batches. Now, between these 2 migrations was the second great migration of the Druhu tribes, linguistic ancestors of the 5 European branches: Italic, Celtic, Germanic, Baltic, and Slavic, which took place in the pre-Rigvedic period. So they had already migrated to Afghanistan and from there into Central Asia in the pre-Rigvedic period, though they were still in contact with the Anus and Purus to their south. Now, the early stages of these migrations are actually recorded in the Puranic traditions. I've given the 5 Puranic references here, which say that these tribes migrated northwards from Afghanistan into Central Asia. Later, though the Puranas, of course, don't follow them with a video camera all the way to Europe, but we can know now that they migrated northwestward all the way to Europe. Now, remnants of the Druhus are still found as western allies of the Anus in the Dasharatnam battle. See, the main Druhus are gone. But again, remnants remain. They were still there in the Punjab, a few remnants, but they were a minor group and they had aligned with the Anus in the Dasharatnam battle. So you find Druhus also mentioned as a minor segment in the Dasharatnam battle. But later they fade away from the pages of traditional Indian history, which knows nothing more about the Druhus. Now, the priestly class of the Druhus, the Celtic Druids, are remembered as enemies in both the Rigveda and the Avesta. Because in the Avesta, when Zoroaster, who is a Bhrigu or Atharvan, remember. Now, these 3 tribal groups, the Purus, Anus, and Druhus, had 3 groups of priests. The priests of the Purus or Indo-Aryans were the Angirases. The priests of the Proto-Iranians were the Atharvans or Bhrigus. The present-day Zoroastrian priests are still called Atharvans. And the priests of the Druhus, the Celtic Druids, were called Druid. Now, this is recorded in the Dasharatnam battle, where it once refers to the enemies as Bhrigus and Druhus. That is the priests of the 2 coalitions against them, Bhrigu and Druhu. That is the Bhrigu Atharvans, Iranian Bhrigu Atharvan, and the Druids. Now they are remembered in the Avesta also as enemies of Zarathustra, who is a Bhrigu Atharvan. Now when Zarathustra is meditating in the forest, as in many traditions, you find it even in the Buddha's this thing and other traditions also. When someone is meditating, enemies come and try to distract them. Now in the Avesta, the two people who try to distract Zarathustra from the meditations are Angra and Druj. So obviously the Angresas and Druj, the priests of the other two tribal conglomerates of the north. In sum, it is impossible to arrive at a correct understanding of Rigvedic history without understanding that Vedic culture and religion were not the ancestral culture or religion of the whole of India, but only of the Purus. There was a type of religion common to the Druhus, Anus, and Purus, consisting of ritual fire worship, yajnas. The Druids also did that. In the temples in Ireland, they kept eternal fires, like in the Zoroastrian Atash Behram. And the Zoroastrian priests contain yajnas, just like the Vedic priests, and they are called yasna, which are given rise to the modern Persian word jashna. Parsis still hold jashnas, you will remember, and jashna has acquired the meaning of celebration, so to say. In Urdu and all, it is used like that. And also nature worship. You see Zoroastrian praying to the rising sun, praying to lakes, praying to water, praying to the fire. And the memorization and recitation, the composition, memorization and recitation of hymns. This is done in the Rigveda, it is done in the Avesta. And if you read the details of the Druids of Ireland, this was also their main occupation. They used to compose hymns, learn them by heart and recite them. Now, so these three northern people, Druhus, Anus and Purus, consists of the 12 branches which have been reconstructed into Proto-Indo-European by the linguists. Now, they have not been able to take into consideration the ancestral forms of the internal Indo-Europeans, that is the Yadus, Turvasus, Ikshvakus and others, because those are not recorded anywhere. Because later as Puru culture spread everywhere, the Vedic culture, their language got merged into the Vedic language. But they had other languages belonging to the Indo-European family. Now, as the Puru culture spread all over India, all the religions of India merged together into what we call Hinduism today. The Vedic culture of the Purus, all this yajna, nature worship and hymns. The nature religions of the Yadus. In the Mahabharata, Krishna, the Yadus worship the mountain. And Indra is angry because he wants them to worship him. So he sends a storm. And Krishna saves the Yadus by picking up Govardhan on his finger. So you see, here you see the Yadus originally worshipped mountains, they did not worship Indra. Now, then you have the philosophical systems of the Ikshvakus. Now, see, there is very little philosophy in the Vedic text. It arises only in the Upanishads. And if you see where the Upanishads are situated, many of them are situated in Bihar, in the courts of Janaka. And where are all the other philosophical systems of India originated? Where did Buddhism originate? In Bihar. Where did Jainism originate? In Bihar. Where did Charvaka system and other atheistic and agnostic systems of Indian philosophies originate? In Bihar. And so you see, all the philosophical systems were in the east. Further east were the tantric systems in probably West Bengal and Orissa, the region. And the idol culture and temple culture, which is the central part of Hinduism today, it was there in central and south India. So you see, Hinduism today has not come from the Vedic culture of the Rigveda. It is an amalgamation of all the Indian cultures which existed at that time. Only thing is they were not recorded because the Rigveda records only the culture of the Bharata Purus, not of the others. Now, the most important aspect of the data on the Bharata Puru battle is that it provides us direct recorded evidence that the Proto-Indo-European homeland from where the last branches emigrated was North India. Now, this location is also proved by other factors which are not part of this talk. For example, an examination of all the linguistic evidence. Now, this whole thing started with linguistics. Nowhere was it ever recorded that there was any people called Aryans or called anything who migrated from the west to India, from India to the west or anywhere. No one knew about any such thing. No tradition recorded any such idea. Until the European scholars came here, they studied the Indian languages and they found such a striking similarity between Sanskrit and the languages of Europe. So striking that it could not be chance, it is not borrowed, it represents an ancestral language, a common ancestral language. So then they started studying all the languages of the world, and they got this of the different language families, the Indo-European, Dravidian, Ostrich, Sino-Tibetan, Ostrich, Semitic, etc. Now, and then they didn't know at that time where was the original homeland. Many of them thought it must be India because Sanskrit has the oldest culture. But as they produced linguistic arguments, the view shifted to the steppes of South Russia. However, the thing is that people have been so dazzled and mesmerized by the idea that linguistics proves the steppe homeland that no one has examined the linguistic evidence. However, I have done it in detail, all the linguistic evidence in my books. It has also been done by other scholars, some more aspects, by Konrad Elst and by Nicholas Kazanas, who have also discovered many points which prove linguistically that India was the original homeland and not the steppes. Now, this linguistic evidence is very massive. It covers every single point of linguistics which can show us the location. Everything in linguistics does not show us the location. It just shows the relation. But some things shows where the original location was. And all of these things show it was North India and not the steppes. So that is a very vast topic which obviously I cannot touch upon here. And the second is the datable evidence for the recorded Mitanni material in West Asia, which proves that the Rig Veda goes back to beyond 3000 BC in Haryana. Now the Mitanni tribes are recorded in West Asia, in Syria and Iraq. It was an empire which was founded in 1500 BC. It covered a large part of present-day Syria and Iraq, and it was one of the main empires of West Asia, rivaled by the Hittites and by the Egyptians and Babylonians. Now, the Mitanni people, they are Indo-Aryans. They are the oldest recorded Indo-Aryans outside India. Later, we have the Romani or the Gypsies in modern times who migrated from India 1000 years ago. But before that, we have the Mitanni who are actually recorded in West Asia, and they are recorded before the oldest datable record in India. Which is the oldest datable record in India? Not the Rig Veda, because we don't have datable text of the Rig Veda. The oldest datable record is the Ashoka pillars, which we date to the 3rd or 3rd century BC. Before that, there is no datable record except the Indus Valley Harappan record, but that language has not yet been deciphered. So before that, in 1500 BC, we have the Mitanni records recorded by carbon dating and other scientific methods in West Asia, and they are purely Indo-Aryan names. Some people foolishly say, that the oldest records are in West Asia, so it means that the Vedic people came from there. They are not found in India; they are found in West Asia. Actually, that is how the kind of illiterate arguments which are sometimes made. Now, if you examine the Mitanni language or whatever words are there in the Mitanni language which are common to the Rig Veda, you find I have shown in detail in all my things that the Rig Veda consists of two very distinct parts: the old Rig Veda and the new Rig Veda. The old Rig Veda is book 63742, and the new Rig Veda is books 1, 5, 8, 9, 10. Now, all the significant words in the Mitanni data are found in the new Rig Veda. They're completely missing in the old Rig Veda, which means that the language of the Mitanni developed in India at the time of composition of the new Rig Veda. And at the time of composition of the old Rig Veda, the Mitanni's ancestors were inside India speaking the old Rig Vedic language before the new words entered their speech during the period of the new Rig Veda. So this shows that they went from India. Now, what is more, now if they are already found already, the ancestors of the Mitanni are found in West Asia in 1800 BC. They have already forgotten the ancestral language except retaining certain names and a few words which remained in the Mitanni kingdom. So, if they are found already in West Asia in 1800 BC, obviously they must have left India at least 200 years before. And then they reached at least 200, I say, before 2000 BC. And they reached West Asia and they actually forgot the ancestral language and merged with the local people by and large. So, they left India before 2000 BC. So, in India, the new Rigvedic period was well before 2000 BC. Now, before the new Rigvedic period was the old Rigvedic period, which is so far before the new Rigvedic period that the language is completely different. I have shown in detail in my blogs and books that the language of the new Rigveda contains a huge, massive vocabulary which is completely missing in the old Rig Veda, and parts of that vocabulary are found in the Avesta as well as in the Mitanni, but not in the old books. So the old books of the Rig Veda go back beyond the Mitanni, beyond the Avesta, and beyond the new Rig Veda. Now, the and when we see the geography of the text, the new Rig Veda is spread out over the whole Rigvedic area, that is from Haryana to Afghanistan. But the old Rig Veda is spread out only from in western Uttar Pradesh and Haryana, that is to the east of the Saraswati. And then the movements of the Bharata Purus westwards in the battles of Sudas, the Dasharajna and Harilupya are described in the old books of the Rig Veda. So now we see how the Purus were originally in Haryana, migrated or spread out westwards till Afghanistan. So you see, when will you date the old Rig Veda? Obviously, well before 2500 BC. And in that period, the old Rig Veda knows only the areas of Haryana and Western Uttar Pradesh. It does not know the areas, it does not even know the Indus River. It does not know the word Sapta Sindhu. It does not know the word Gandhari. All these words appear in the new Rig Veda. It does not know the Bactrian camel. It does not know sheep and goats, which are found in the north, in Kashmir and Afghanistan and Pakhtunistan. They all appear in the new Rig Veda. And they are words in common with the Avesta. So, which means that the old Rig Veda goes back beyond 2500 BC. In the old Rig Veda, the names of the rivers are all purely Indo-Aryan names, which means that they are not people who newly arrived in the area from somewhere. They are long residents of the area, because river names don't change that fast. So before 2500 BC, the rivers of Haryana and Punjab are already Indo-Aryan names. So the Rig Veda goes far back beyond 3000 BC. So when all these fraudulent genetic experts, so-called, they claim that there is evidence that genetics shows that the steppe gen was brought into India by the steppe immigrants after 2000 BC. You see, they all accept that it could not have occurred before 2000 BC. It occurred after 2000 BC. So obviously, it has nothing to do with the Aryans. The Indo-European languages were in India, and the migration from India is recorded in our text. So these are independent subjects. I've just mentioned them in short. Now, another thing is that they say the steppe DNA entered India after 2000 BC. But if you look at the Reich report, of which so much was made by Reich and his fellow scholars, and by Tony Joseph in his book Early Indians, you will see that the earliest steppe DNA which is found is not found in Haryana or Punjab. It is found in Swat area, which is the northernmost area of Pakistan, which borders on Central Asia. Which means they were not spread. The steppe gene was not found all over India. It was found. It first entered in the Swat area. And what are the dates? It is 1100 BC to 100 BC. So the steppe DNA entered India in the extreme northern part in 1100 BC. So how can they claim that the Vedic Aryans came after 2000 BC and brought those genes into India? So you see, they are committing a pure and shameless brazen fraud. As I said, these are independent subjects, not part of the subject of the particular talk. So I will end my talk here.
The first time I think that I hear any talk about the Dasharajna battle, which is indeed a world historical event, because without it, the Iranians and even the Greeks would not have been a separate political entity. And so the whole history of the Persian Empire, of Greek civilization, Alexander's conquest, and so on, all would not have been there but for the Battle of the Ten Kings. Just a little afterthought. The very last week before I had to run away from India for the Corona stuff, I was in I was in the basin of the Saraswati River in the Brahmarishi ashram near Chandigarh. And so there I met someone who explained, you see, the place where the Battle of the Ten Kings had taken place. Because apparently the site is known on the Parushni River, which is exactly on the border between India and Pakistan. So you could say, jocularly, but nevertheless, that the Battle of the Ten Kings was the first Indo-Pak war, which obviously was won by the Indian side, as usual. But nevertheless, you see, if I were the governor of East Punjab or so, I would set up a big theme park there, and get people to, to celebrate the ancient heroes and the start of this, this world history. So this has all become possible thanks to your enlightening analysis of the Ten Kings War. So thank you, Shrikant.
Only thing, one point, if you don't mind, may I make one comment? That yes, it is true, but we cannot really call it an Indo-Pak war because those people of Pakistan at that time were not people who had been converted to a foreign religion. They were purely Indian. They were all as Indian as the Purus. The Purus, Anus, Gruyos were all purely Indian. So, I, in particular, not only in case of this Dasharatne war, but in the case of any text, I don't think it is patriotic of us to take the side of one person and oppose the other person. In Mahabharata, for example, we support everything that the Pandavas do and criticize, for example, Karna, even when he's the wronged one. So I don't accept this kind of thing. I think we have to have a open mind because especially none of them are foreigners. They are foreign invaders.
But here I would like to remark, you see, this is one of the absolutely great things about your analysis of the Ten Kings battle, that you emphasize that this was not a battle between good and evil or something. Very many Vedic apologists say that the Aryans were the good ones and the rest were the evil ones. Perhaps this is an effect also of the fact that Asura, which is a class of gods, but which became the favorite gods of the Avestan people, that has later in India become a term for demon. So they project this meaning onto the ancient time when they see this as a battle between gods and demons, and it was not at all. The likeness with an Indo-Pak war is also fostered by the fact that regardless of this wrong interpretation of Asura and so on, but that there really is a certain religious distinction in the fact that the Vasishta describes the enemies as Adeva, Ayajna, and Anindra. So they are without gods, without the fire sacrifice, and without Indra, which is a very exact description of the Zoroastrian religion, which demonizes Indra, apparently because in some earlier battle, you see the Persians as well as the Indians had invoked Indra, but of course he could only give victory to only one side. So the Persian side had lost. And whereas most people, when they ask for something from God and don't get it, they blame themselves. They say, oh, I sinned, or I didn't fast enough, or something. You see, the Iranians were made of sterner stuff. So they looked up to Indra and they said, okay, if you don't give us victory, we reject you. And so they became Anindra, they became Adeva, they rejected the Devas, and they did not have the Yajna in the sense that they also worshipped the fire, but they did not use it as a medium for sacrifices. They don't throw things into the fire. So, of course, you see the relation between these different sects was not the same as that between Islam and Hinduism. That is, of course, an unjustified projection. But nevertheless, there is a slight religious difference. And that was not the reason for the battle. You see, that only became important to Vasishta afterwards. When the battle was analyzed, then, of course, he made a big thing of this religious difference. But nevertheless, it's an interesting datum that religious difference is there. and it confirms the identification of the enemies as the Iranians.
I have two questions. Were Jews and Turks immigrated from Hindustan? And this Kalayavana, who comes in Mahabharata, where was his kingdom exactly situated?
I don't think the Jews have any such tradition. I don't know about it. It may be one of those theories where people, take all the people, the origin of all the people in the world from India, but I don't think the Jews themselves have ever claimed that they are from India. Turks have no connection. These are all later historical people. And see, I have, in the very beginning, that is why I said, if you try to ask, for example, who was Turoyana in the Rig Veda, and he is there in the Rig Veda, and yet he has no connection with, because as I said, this Rig Veda is the oldest text. And when it just refers to a name once or twice, we have no means of knowing anything more about that name. Unlike, in the modern songs, as I said, when people are named, we already know the context and the story behind those names. But when names are just mentioned in the Rig Veda, we know nothing about them. So you see, even names which are there in the Rig Veda, we cannot really put them in the historical place. So if you just take some modern people like Turks and Jews and try to locate them in the Rig Veda, I at least have no means of, helping in that matter.
Where was Kalayavana's kingdom was exactly situated?
I really don't know, because the word Kala, which means age or period, time, Kal. Now this word is a very, very late Rigvedic word which appears only once in the Rigveda, in the last book of the Rigveda. It is not there a Rigvedic word. It is not found in any other Indo-European land. It is a very new word, unique to that. So, and Yavanato is certainly not found anywhere. That was the name of the Greeks, the Ionians. So, if the Mahabharata or any text talks of Kala Yavanas, I don't think it has any connection with anything in the Rig Veda. And now, if you want to know where his kingdom was, I think you'll have to search the records in the book where he's referred to. I can't answer it from the Rig Veda.
Just a little addition to your answer about Jews coming from India. It so happens, and this I say at the risk of nurturing the miserable, Hindu tendency to deduce everything coming from India. But it so happens that the very first Greek mention of the Jews is when Aristotle says that the Jews are descendants of the sages from India. And, and I may add to this that the Jews indeed came from Ur of the Chaldees, according to the Bible. That's where Abraham came from, which is like exactly near the ports in Mesopotamia that traded with India. So, strictly speaking, it's not entirely impossible.
The Jews spoke a Semitic language, so that has no connection with the Rigvedic language or culture. Secondly, what the Greeks say about the Jews and connecting them with India in a much, much later period is we cannot trace it back to real origins, because as I said, the Yavanas who are mentioned in the Mahabharata, no one knows that they are the descendants of the Alinas who are mentioned in the Rig Veda. So the contacts have been completely lost, and it is a new people who have come back into India as the Greeks. So how the Greeks should know that the Jews came from India, the sages of India, I don't know. On the other hand, you find the Bible, it tries to draw up a family tree where the sons of, there is all this Ham and Shem and Joshaphat or whatever. And all the people of the world are derived from them, including Chinese, Indians and all. See, those are things you cannot take seriously. So I don't know how far these things can be corroborated.
No, but that's why I say it's a coincidence, and so it risks feeding this idea that everything and everyone came from India. I mean, I also don't take this serious, but it so happens.
Okay, the first thing is that the entire movement that you have shown from east to west in your books and in your talk, that is predicated on the early Rig Veda and the later Rig Veda, the relative chronology of the two parts, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, what if an entire, within a book of the Rig Veda, say Mandala 5 or Mandala 6, which is one of the youngest or the oldest, what if within a single mandala, it is actually a layered text in the sense that, you have a lot of chronological mixing within the verses and within the hymns. So would that not really change the entire scenario? So long as you
No,
keep
it
the
is not.
relative chronology at the base of books, that sounds fine.
Yeah, you're right. But there is a difference. See, in my recent blog article, the chronological gulf between the old Rig Veda and the new Rig Veda, I have analyzed the huge mass of names. And those names, cover almost every hymn in book 1, 8, 9, and 10, and almost in 8, 9, and 10, and a huge percentage of the hymns in book 1 and 5. And they are found only in the new books, they're missing in the old Rig Veda. So even if there are layers within each book, those layers are not different from each other. Especially in book 5, for example, you find the geographical names or the names of particular people. They are spread out throughout the book 5, including in the older hymns as well as the redacted hymns. And that is the only main distinction within the family books. There are old hymns and there are redacted hymns which were modified and changed all the time. So they exhibit a later linguistic state. But in spite of that, all the hymns in book 5 come in the late stage. So even if there are layers and we manage to find layers within one book, all those layers are just sub layers, part of one big layer. I mean, you can see that article of mine, a huge list of words and the hymns and verses that they cover. It covers all these new books and simply refuses to touch the old books, except sometimes in the redacted hymns, which were changed in the new period.
So, at the risk of annoying you, I will ask you this genetics related question. When you talk about these migrations out of India, I think maybe you have not explicitly stated it, but you are probably looking at only elites or certain clans moving out rather than entire populations, which would not result in a genetic signal. Am I correct in making that inference?
Exactly. That is what I'm saying, that even as per normal linguistic theory, these languages were carried from one area to other by a process of elite dominance. So the people of that area adopted the local language. Exceptions were where they entered some big civilizational area, like when they entered Mesopotamia, the Hittites, the Mitanni, the Kassites all lost their original languages and merged into the local languages. But when they entered areas in, say, Central Asia, Steppes, and Europe, which did not have big civilizations at that time, their languages were adopted by the local people. So it was the local people, as I repeatedly say in my books, the Greeks who came in later Mauryan times, they were not descendants of the Alinas. Their language was a descendant of the Alina language, which was taken there by some groups of Alinas in the ancient past and adopted by the local people of Greece. So there is no genetic question of it. There is a difference between genetic and linguistic situation.
Your blogs, you have also explained how the memory of the Drukgyal people and the Brigu and the Anu people, and also today the Battle of the Ten Kings, is some sort of in somehow preserved in other European branches. So, what other common elements you see in the European branches, which are specific to India and which can also strengthen our out of India theory? That's one. And while you do that, you can also explain the importance of the Proto-Indo-European word for elephant, because elephants is something important which is only found in India out of all the possible pi homeland hypotheses. And the other last one was about the name Bharat of our country, and how is it related somehow to the Bharata Purus, and I mean, if there is any similarity or any relation between them, could you please elaborate? Thank you.
Well, I have no idea because I have not studied all the European languages to that extent. I have studied the Rig Veda. So that is so far as my expertise at the moment goes. So that question I cannot answer that at the moment. The second question is about, I think, the elephant. Now, this is again, I spoke about linguistics. Now, this is where again the linguists adopt a very fraudulent attitude. I have written a very long and detailed blog. It's in fact very heavy and tedious, and it gives all kinds of detailed information on the subject on the elephant and the Proto-Indo-European homeland. If you read that, you'll see what massive evidence there is that the Indo-Europeans went out from India because of the name of the elephant. The elephant is found only in India and Southeast Asia and in Africa. Now, no one claims that the Indo-Europeans originated in Southeast Asia or Africa. And yet, all the branches, oldest branches of Indo-European have a common word for elephant, which all the linguists firmly refuse to take into consideration. And yet, sometimes when they do try to take it into consideration, they deny it. They say, no, the Hittite word was borrowed from somewhere, and the Greek word was borrowed from somewhere, and the Latin word was borrowed from somewhere. But all these words, like I have shown the original word was ribha, from the root rib, which means to grab. So it has the same meaning as hastin, hand. See, the elephant, the most prominent feature of the elephant is the hand. So in later time now we call it hasti, etc. from the word hastin or hand. So the word ribha for grabbing, which you do with the hand. So the original word was ribha. That was prakritized already by Rigvedic times because it was such an old, ancient, domesticated animal in India that already ribha has become ibha. However, the r part is, and remember in Proto-Indo-European, R and L are alternating. Now you find the Greek word is elephas, so which is clearly derived from ribha, ilfa. So because BH becomes PH in Greek, so it is a direct derivation of the word ribha. Then the Hittite word for ivory is lapa, which again is clearly derived from ribha. And the Latin word is ebur. Now ebur takes place by what is known as what that word is, where within a word, the word continues, but one letter from the word gets transferred to another part of the word. Like in English we say crocodile, but in Spanish we say crocodilo. So the R comes in the beginning, although in English it is in the beginning. But in the Italian Spanish word, it comes afterwards as grillo. So in a school, as I always mention, Catholic boys from Goa always used to say ask for ask. So you see, they change the order of the two sounds, K and S. So that kind of process took place, and what must have been rebu or erbu became ebur in Latin. So all these words very clearly have a common origin in the word ribha, and yet the linguists very fraudulently refuse to accept this. They sometimes don't even mention it because they don't know what arguments to give against it. And when they do mention it, they somehow say, no, these are all unconnected words. This Sanskrit word was borrowed from something else. The Latin word was borrowed from another language. And so also the Hittite and Greek words. Now, how is it that four distinctly different Indo-European languages from four different parts adopted the same word from other languages? But there is no record of any of those other languages. Neither the language from which Sanskrit borrowed, nor the language from which Greek borrowed, or the language from which Latin or Hittite borrowed. Yet all these branches separately, it seems, borrowed that same word out of thin air. So you see how fraudulent they are. And yet this Mallory, in his book, he tells us that if any word is found in Hittite branch and in any one of the other 11 branches, we have to accept it as an original word. And then the same scholar afterwards refuses to accept this word ribha, which is found not only in Hittite, but also in Greek, Latin, and Vedic, and also indirectly in Germanic and Slavic, where it has been transferred to Tamil. Now, this shows the kind of degree of hypocrisy which is there. And then they say, that all these words cannot be derived from a common form. But I have just shown how all of them can be derived from ribha, which none of them have ever taken into consideration, if they even thought of it. And at the same time, the word for fox. Now, there are different words for fox in all the different languages, but they are all derived from an original word. This, the Europeans, the linguists accept. And then they say, all of them don't lead back to one form. There are 5 or 6 original protoforms, different protoforms from which all these words came. So in that case, they're willing to accept that it was an original word. And here, they use that argument to say that all the words for elephant are not from a common word, so they cannot be an original word. So this is the degree of fraudulent behavior. I won't even call it wrong scholarship. I always say, the early Indologists, Max Miller or whatever, they wrote many wrong things, but they were not fraudulent. They just didn't think of this thing. They were looking through certain glasses at the evidence and they interpreted them wrongly. But today what we see in the leftist scholars and the Western scholars is pure fraudulence. They refuse to even look at evidence which disproves them. There is, for example, the linguistic evidence by who shows that the European branches, German, Italic, Celtic, etc., they borrowed words from Central Asia, which means that they passed through Central Asia. And she takes the center of origin of the spread of the Indo-European languages in Central Asia, Bactria. So this proves it because the Druzyus went into Afghanistan and then they moved to Europe. So when I quoted her and gave her full detailed linguistic analysis in my book, she was attacked from all sides by Western scholars. How could you write this thing? You must take it back. So in her recent, if you see her paper on academia, she has added a preface which says that I take back what I had written. She doesn't deny it because she knows that what she wrote was right. She cannot deny it. So she says what I wrote was correct. It was a beautiful theory, but still it does not show that they went from bacteria. Before that, they must have come from the West. So you see, this is the degree of fraudulence which is there in so-called scholarship. So it is up to us whether we present a united face and force them to accept the truth. One person shouting out in one place is not enough. For example, since 200 years, all the Western scholars, linguists, archaeologists, Indologists have been saying that the Saraswati of the Rig Veda is the Ghaggar-Akra river. But as soon as in the last 20 years, we pointed out that the Rig Veda is situated on the Saraswati river and all the Harappan sites are also on the Saraswati river. So that proves their identity. Immediately now, all the scholars, they're going back and they're saying, no, the Ghaggar-Akra is not the Saraswati of the Rig Veda. The Saraswati of the Rig Veda is in Afghanistan. The same scholars who had insisted, like Witzel, that it is in the Ghaggar-Akra, now they say it is in Afghanistan. And most fraudulent of all is people, when they claim that, all the time we had said it was in Afghanistan. Now it is the Hindu nationalists who are claiming it is in Ghaggar-Akra. But you can check the records of what all the Indologists and linguists have said up till now. All of them said it was Ghaggar-Akra. And now they're blatantly lying and saying that all along we said it was Afghanistan. And now it is the Hindu nationalists who are saying it is in Ghaggar-Akra. So that shows the level of fraud to which these scholars can go to perpetuate their disproved theories. All the writers produced all sorts of evidence to show that there was no Islamic structure below that, and no Hindu structure below the Babri Masjid. And then when finally the archaeologists proved it by actually digging on the spot, and even the Supreme Court bench, including a Muslim judge, accepted that yes, there was a Hindu structure below the Aba. Now they're quiet. They don't accept that they are lying and being fraudulent all this while. So you see, we have to counter them, but we need not take them too seriously.
Shrikantji, could you tell us the name of the lady researcher, the Indologist who had to backtrack? Who was threatened?
Conrad, could you tell who is that?
Yes. Yeah. This is Joanna Nichols.
Sorry, it's Joanna Nichols.
And the same story can be told about another scholar with another very important discovery, namely Klaus-Peter Zoller, who discovered Proto-Bangani, which is a deep layer in a certain dialect in Kumaon, Hindi dialect, where you have a substratum of ancient Indo-European words that have traits of European languages. So this shows that European languages actually left from India. And so he also has written that, yes, I stand by my discovery, and other linguists like Anvita Abi, like Hans-Heinrich Hock, have confirmed it. But nevertheless, I object to Hindu nationalists taking it as proof of the out of India theory. Same story. Thanks.
My understanding that I'm getting is because of the Dasrajna battle, it was initially the people's movement, right, towards the west and the northwest. But later from that region, or even before that, it was like from the steppe to Europe, Central Europe, it was cultural movement. So is that understanding correct? So initially it was people's movement until the steppes and near region of northwest India, and later into the Europe it was cultural movement.
Now it is not a question of movement of people or movement of culture. It is a question of movement of languages. It is a question of movement of people when genetics enters into this thing. Now languages can move originally, obviously they begin with a movement of people. Buddhism went from India to China, Japan, etc. with a movement of people. But you don't find Indian genes in the Chinese and Japanese people, because by cultural transmission, they adopted the religion. In Indian Muslims also, you don't find Arabic genes. They just adopted the religion. So in the same way, languages were adopted by different people in a long and complicated historical course covering thousands of years and thousands of miles. We can't really quantify it and explain every step and every stage. But we only know the beginning and the end result.
My second question is actually it was related to this because last year there was a study, a genetic study again, of 96 genomes in the area around the Switzerland, Germany, and the France. So the study says that out of this 96 genomes, they found actually Stepes ancestry entering into that region around 2800 BCE. So if that is the case, and if it could that be related to like the movement of this as a as a outcome of the Dasrajna battle? Is that even related to Dasrajna battle?
No, because see, I already said that it was in the pre-Rigvedic period that the Druzyos had already moved into Central Asia, and then they started moving in a belt, in that order: Italic, Celtic, Germanic, Baltic, and Slavic. They moved into Europe across the steppes. Now, as we don't have recorded evidence, we can't date every stage of the journey. As I said, only the end result and the beginning we can know. So we know the beginning, it started in the pre-Rigvedic period. The Druzyos who were there during the Rigvedic period were the remnants of the original Druzyos. Many of them were already in Central Asia or already on the way to Europe in a later Rigvedic period. So 2800 BC is quite a reasonable, well, I don't know what it is. That archaeologists will have to say. But certainly it can be fitted into this moment of the Druzyos. Obviously, we can't produce recorded data of all this.
Are there any direct descendants of Bharat Puru in India today? Or does the name Bharat come from the Rigvedic Bharat Puru?
Yeah, but over a long process of historical development, because the Bharata Purus were the most important people in the Rigveda. Now, if you see the Puranas, they have invented all kinds of stories of this. For example, Vishwamitra's daughter, Shakuntala, and her son is supposed to be Bharata, or after whom the country is named. But obviously it can't be, because Vishwamitra is just a priest in the Rigveda. So his grandson can't be Bharata, who was the ancestor of the Bharata Puru tribes. So you see, as I said, the Puranas, make up stories. I gave the example of Vritra, who turned into a Brahmin and by killing him Indra gets. So, all kinds of new stories are added onto the original Rigvedic core. So here also Bharata Purus are, because the Bharata Purus were a branch of the Purus, a sub-tribe. And in book 6, which is the oldest book, they refer to the actual ancestral Bharata king. Only once he is referred to as a king in the Rigveda in book 6. So he was a far ancestor of Divodasa and Sinjaya and Devavata and all of them. Sudas. So he is the Bharata after whom all this is named. And the Puranas, of course, know nothing about him, but they know that the importance of the Bharata Purus in the Rigveda. Secondly, the Mahabharata is the big epic of India. And the people of the Mahabharata were also a sect of Purus. They were the Kurus. So they also called themselves Bharatas. So they also considered Bharata to be the ancestor. So because Mahabharata is the national epic of India, somehow that name Bharatvarsha or Bharata spread, became standard for the whole country. So yes, it is connected, but not in direct linear way in which you can show the derivation of that. I have repeatedly in my books pointed out that all these are ancestral people. They were people who existed at the time of the Rigveda. No one today is a descendant of those people. Like you say Yadus. Now Yadavas are there today, caste, but they obviously have nothing to do with the Yadus of the Rigveda. Now I always give an example from my own community rather than give from other communities. Now we Saraswats are supposed to have come from Kashmir, Haryana, Punjab area, the area of the Saraswati. We settled down in Goa, Maharashtra and areas further south. Now, this is not just a myth or a tradition. It is proved by the Konkani language. Recently, I have written a blog about the Konkani language because it contains all kinds of elements which are native only to that area, which are not found in Marathi or any other language of India except in Konkani. Like we say Udaka for water and Swan for dog, which are derived to the Rigvedic words which are found in all the other 11 branches of the world. But all modern words are derived from Pani and Kutta. So, and then there are many other features. But that is language which has been retained. But if you look at Saraswat, will you see us as descendants of Kashmiris or Haryanvis? We look just like other people of Maharashtra, Goa, and this thing. So you see, language is a completely different story from the genetic or race of the people. So as I said, there are no descendants of the Purus. Even when you say, for example, the Gotras. So my Gotra is Kaundinya, which is a Vasishtha Gotra. Does that mean I'm a descendant of Vasishtha? It is impossible because see, of my 2 parents, one was a Kaundinya. Of my four grandparents, one was a Kaundinya. Of my 8 great-grandparents, one was a Kaundinya. If you go back 50 generations, how many of my ancestors were Kaundinyas? So you see, obviously, this is just a convention. Like I retained my name Talgeri through a few generations. There must be other surnames in India which have survived many generations. But if you go by the 2 parents and 4 grandparents and all, obviously that heritage is only a small part of the ancestral heritage. So similarly, there is no one who is a descendant of these ancient people. All may be in small parts. Because, people have migrated from one part of India to the other, adopting the local languages and culture and all, in such a hodgepodge and jumble that you cannot extract original people and relate them to the Vedic times.
So another one that I had, it could be an interesting one because when people talk about the Proto-Indo-European, everyone is sort of interested to know what is the accuracy of the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European. Because even in one of your talks with the Kushal, I heard you saying that if we find more branches elsewhere in the world, which are the Indo-European branches, then the reconstruction of Proto-Indo-European has to be done again, just to make sure that that branch is also can also be derived from the reconstructed one. So and also a lot of scholars and I also I think you also made a note in one of your blogs that the inner Indo-European languages in India do not descend directly from the corpus of the Vedic text and the Rig Veda, but they were actually descended of possibly different branches which existed to the east of the Purus. So if we consider that as a fact, let's say that there were some branches which are lost and they were Sanskritized over time. So then that puts a big question on the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European because definitely those lost branches were not taken into consideration while reconstructing the Proto-Indo-European. So is the Proto-Indo-European even accurate as of now?
Okay, see, Proto-Indo-European has been artificially reconstructed from all the accepted present descendants. Now, as you said, the inner Indo-European languages of the Ikshvakus, Yadus, Turvashus are not recorded anywhere. So their words are missing in this reconstructed language first. Secondly, even the process of reconstructing languages is very complicated and can be very tricky. For example, now you take all the modern North Indian languages and you reconstruct the word for a horse. It will be something like Ghoda, Ghotaka. It is the Sanskrit word Ghotaka, which is found in later Sanskrit. But that is not the Vedic word. The Vedic word is Ashwa. And if the Rig Veda and Vedic literature was completely absent and people had reconstructed the original word, we would never have come to the word Ashwa. Similarly, in the Latin or Italic languages, all the words have words like French cheval, cheval, and cabal and other such words, derived from a Latin word caballus, which did not mean horse. The Latin word for horse was equus. But suppose the Latin language was not available and they had reconstructed it, then that word equus would never have been found. So you see, there are very many tricky aspects of trying to reconstruct a language. So we cannot accept it as absolute. Second thing is, third thing rather is that we do not know how far this process is wrong because they, as I showed, how they refuse to accept the words for elephant, etc. And now take the Greek word theos, which means God. Now, all the other languages have words like Deos, Devas, Deva, etc. for God. Now, these people say, according to their rule, the in other languages cannot be tha in Greek. So, theos cannot be an Indo-European word. It is borrowed from some other language. Again, how did it borrow from another language yet such a strikingly similar word with the only difference of the and tha? And where is that language? Where is it recorded? So, you see, their pronouncements are very whimsical and, biased. So, you cannot take that thing very seriously. At the same time, as the Proto-Indo-European language is not recorded anywhere, it has to be reconstructed. So as a working model with plenty of, what should we say, reservations, we can accept it as a working model. And we see that it is more than us. It is the linguists themselves who refuse to accept it when they refuse the common word for elephant, etc. So it is people who don't like it who reject words. So let us try to be more practical. We'll accept it, but let's not be too fanatical about it. That Theos is a non-Indo-European word and Ibha is not a non-Indo-European word and all that. We should have there is a word in Sanskrit, Viveka Buddhi, our ability to look at something and use our brains when we are analyzing it. So we have to do that. We can't go by strict rules, dogmatic rules.
The question which I wanted to ask you was related to, essentially it is in the context of the talk. Of course, you have done an enormous work, but in the context of Rigved, Dashraj, King, etc., there is a genealogy of Devas and Asuras or Devas and Danavas, which is related to the marriage of sage Kashyap with Diti and Aditi, and then there is a imputation, let us say, that the Danavas moved towards Europe. And there are certain, linguistic connotations which give Kashmir after the name of Sage Kashyap. Caspian Sea is named after Sage Kashyap, etc., etc. So, to best of my knowledge, I don't think Kashyap figures prominently in Rigvedic corpus. So, what would you tell us or add to this observation?
Kashyapa is a rishi who appears in the later parts of the Rig Veda. So, obviously, he cannot be the ancestor of the Devas and Asuras and others. And as I always say, I cannot really seriously answer questions based on Puranic stories. As I said, Puranic stories have no relevance to these. There are, of course, people who want to justify all the Puranic stories and somehow prove that they're right. I can't help it because people have their obsession. But I cannot answer the questions because the Puranas contain all kinds of things which have no connection with the Rig Veda. How can Kashyapa Prajapati be the ancestor of all these different? And then people talk about Manvantaras and the different Manus and all that is Puranic tradition. There is a difference between religion and history. And for example, recently someone pointed out to me that someone on a Twitter tweet had said that people like me, Conrad Elst and Witzel, all of us distort Vedic history. So he said, see, he's putting you in the same category as Witzel. So I said, he's right. I, Conrad Elst, Bibilal, S.R. Rao, and Romila Thapar, Witzel, and Max Miller, and all of them, all are in one category because we are in the academic category. Some of us tell the truth. Some of us tell lies. That is the difference. But we are all in academic category. But those who, bring up all these religious stories from the Puranas and expect me to incorporate it into Rigvedic history, their discussion should not be with me. It should be with people, of the, say, like the Zakir Naik type, so far as Islamic stories are concerned, or the Billy Graham type, so far as biblical stories are concerned, or all these, mullahs and Christian and Muslim evangelists who, go by the word, Quran, this verse, this hymn says this, or something in the Bible says this. So these people also say something in the Rig Veda says this, something in the Purana says this. I'm sorry, we cannot, religion and academic studies are two totally different things. And I'm not going to, go mad trying to explain religious things and fit them into the Rigvedic data. It is not possible.
Yeah, sorry. I appreciate you have answered my question beautifully from the point of view of Rigved. But the name of the places being in that direction, which is the axis of possible migration of out of India, which would be roughly the axis of Uttar Path, Kabul, beyond towards Caspian Sea, and finally till the European, mid-European portions, till the sea. That axis is definitely the axis of first the Indo-European language and then Slavic languages, which have all that, which you wonderfully explained. From that point of view, my question is unanswered. Otherwise, you have answered wonderfully. What I'm saying is that from point of view of Kashyap being in the mentioned only in one part of the Rig Veda, which is the later part of the Rig Veda, proves that he could not have been the ancestor from Rig Vedic angle. But his name being given to a sea and to a very prominent area like Kashmir, it still has certain significance in this debate. So, from that point of view, also, I would like you to give a comment.
Yeah, no, that is true, because as I said, the Soma came from areas of Kashmir, northernmost Pakistan, and Afghanistan. So you see, who are associated with the Soma? In my second book, I have given detail. The two families which are associated with Soma are the Bhrugus, who are supposed to introduce the Soma sacrifice, and the Kashyapas. Because of the 10 Apri Suktas of the different families of rishis, it is only the Kashyapas whose Apri Sukta is dedicated to Soma and not to Agni. So they are they dominate the 9th book, which is the book of Soma. So yes, it is possible that they have a connection with Soma, but that has nothing to do with this story. And yes, it may be that they are connected to Kashmir and to the Soma areas and all that. But this has nothing to do with the story of Kashyapa Prajapati and other such people who are all parts of later stories. So I don't see how that can be connected here. Also, Kashyapa in the Rig Veda, it is a word which is common to the Rigvedic language and the Avestan language, and it means tortoise. So you see, this rishi had the name of a tortoise, yes, but that word is common to Avesta and Rig Veda. So it cannot be a Far Eastern word, which ancestral word and all that, because it doesn't fit into the picture.
All I'm saying is that in Puranic corpus, we have the story of Vishnu and Kashyap avatar also. So there is some disconnect which is not fitting in the present thesis presented. But obviously, as people of scientific temperament looking for truth, we'll have to have an eye on the uncomfortable truths also. So in that sense, the name of the places as well as this certain Puranic stories, some of course, like sir has told that they probably cannot be true, but some portions have certain connotations, is what I would like to
see. The problem with Puranic data is, if you go by the Puranas, then you find that the Greeks and Romans and the Cholas, Pandyas and Cheras of the south were all there at the time of the Mahabharata as well as of the Ramayana, because they are mentioned in the Mahabharata and the Valmiki Ramayana. So you can't strictly try to make logic of these references in the Puranas or the epics. Then another thing is that Puranic stories are so out of the way. Now, when I wrote my first book, if anyone has read it in 1993, that was the first time I had ever known anything about the Rig Veda or the Puranas. Before that, they were just known to me as our sacred books. So there it was when I first studied them. Now, the Rig Veda I studied was the book by Malati Shendge, in which she called her book Civilized Demons, the Harappans in the Rig Veda. And she claims that most of the Vedic gods were actually Harappan non-Aryan natives of India. Now, when I found that all these gods are represented in European mythology, how can they be non-Aryan natives of India? So that led me to deeper study of mythology. Then there was the book by P.L. Bhargav about the Puranas. He tried to show that all the Puranic ancestors were in Punjab, and then they spread out over the whole of India. Now, he has given a table of rishis. So according to his table, the oldest rishis are Kanva and Atri, and Vishwamitra and Vasishtha are among the last rishis. So when I started my second book, the Rig Veda Historical Analysis, I thought, see, he has done some analysis, there must be some logic. So I tried to analyze the Rig Veda from that point of view, and I got into such an utter mess that I almost gave up the task of writing the second book. Then I decided, let's not go into the Puranas. They have no connection with the Rig Veda. Let's go only into the Rig Vedas. And then I arrived at the full chronology of the Rig Veda. So you see, if you go by the Puranas, you'll only end in a mess. And if people, are determined that to show that we are true nationalists and true Hindus, we have to somehow justify the Puranic story.
No, I agree with you. Sorry. All I'm saying is, you are absolutely right. Purana is, the data is of less credibility. Absolutely no doubt about it. And the kind of work which you have done in Rigvedic chronology is a stellar work. Probably it is very difficult to dispute it in that relative chronological sense. Having said that, you can always look at Puranic data wherever it is corroborating with the original imputation derived from Rigved. and I'm moving in that direction. So
yeah, for example, in the Puranas, they're supposed to be the sons of Yayati, and all the tribes are descended from them. But Yayati is a character who appears only in the new books of the Rig Veda. So all these tribes cannot be his descendants. They're all, they've picked up names from the Rig Veda and somehow made up stories about them, fabricated stories. It's quite interesting as part of our lore. But let's not try to impose it onto a historical framework. Now, in this particular respect, for example, the Purus are one of the tribes, and so they cannot obviously, all the tribes, including not only the Vedic people, but the other Vedic, non-Vedic tribes to the east and west, all of them cannot be descendants of Yayati, who is mentioned in the late books. But yet, there is one important point that the Puranas bring out, that there is a group of 5 whom they have named as the 5 sons of Yayati. And in the Rig Veda, it is confirmed that these are the 5 tribes which occupied most of North India, except the Ishwakus in the east. So then you see, then that grouping of 5 acquires sense, because it is confirmed by the Rigvedic data, but not in the sense of who is whose father and who is whose son.
So that chronology of Purana can definitely tie you in knots, and it is difficult to unravel. Essentially, Kashyap, like very rightly you said, the tortoise connotation, and the story of Vishnu and avatar of Vishnu in form of Kashyap, which is consequent to the great flood and Matsya avatar, is definitely having some bearing on this framework, is what I suspect.
I read somewhere somebody had written that Vishwamitra and Vashishta are actually family names. So they might not be that same Vishwamitra and Vashishta that carries on even during Rama's time, and So are these family names, Kashyap, Vishwamitra, Vashishta?
Yes, they are family names, because see, there are 10 families of rishis in the Rig Veda. There are Vishwamitra, Vasishtas, Angirasas. There are 3 branches: Bharadwajas, Dirghatamasas, and Vamadevas. So, no, not Vamadevas, I mean Gautamas. Now, then there are Bhrigus, then there are Kashyapas. There are 10 families in all, or rather 9 priestly families and 1 family, which is actually the kings from the Bharatapuru dynasty who became rishis and composed hymns. They were counted as a 10th family. So, of the 10 Apri Suktas, 9 belong to the 9 priestly families, and 1 belongs to the Bharatapuru priests, who have come from the Bharatapuru clan. So, you see, yes, it is a name which goes on, but how far you can apply it to people? Now, how will you decide how the Vishwamitras and different stories are connected with each other? You have, for example, Durvasa, the angry rishi who curses people whenever he gets angry. He is found in every single text. Whenever they require a rishi who is angry and gives curses, Durvasa appears on the scene. So you see that some of them are like, standard figures to put in a certain situation. So I will not go too seriously by these traditional stories and this thing.
Yeah, so question is very simple. The question is that few people claim that while Aryan invasion and Aryan immigration is genetically not possible, but still a very primitive form of Sanskrit went from India to Middle East to West, and then a mature form of Sanskrit came back, and from that primitive form, probably the Indo-Aryan languages came out, and a mature form, and this is one reason why the pre-Vedic Sanskrit and the Vedic Sanskrit or the Sanskrit after that is very different. Have you read anything about it, or do you think it's again another conspiracy theory?
No, there is all this story about Aryan going out and then coming back again. There was this Bhagwan, I think it was Bhagwan Singh, was it, who had written the book Sword of Tipu Sultan or something. He also wrote a book, I think, or is Bhagwan Gidwani. So he wrote a book, The Return of the Aryans. According to him, he accepted that the Aryans had come from outside. And then he tried to say, no, but before that, they must have gone out from India. And then they returned. So you see, this is not serious study. This is just people trying to, play around and just make some senseless things out of it. Now, Sanskrit, Vedic Sanskrit is completely different from later Sanskrit. Because many of the words we use now, I gave an example of the word Kala, which appears only in the last part of the Rig Veda. Now, there are so many words which don't appear in the Rig Veda at all, or they appear later. Now, I always give the example of the word Ratri. Ratri, which is a common word in all the Indian languages for night. But in the Rig Veda, it appears only in the very last part of the Rig Veda. And throughout the Rig Veda, the word is Nakt. And Nakt has equivalences in all the other 11 branches, like night, Noctus, Noshti, etc. All the other 11 branches have that word. and they don't have the word Ratri. And Ratri is found only in the late Rigvedic and later this thing. So you see, there is a great this thing. Now again, what is that word Ratri? So it is possible that it is a word from the Eastern Purus or the Eastern people. As I said, there were other Indo-European dialects within India. So it may have been a word from the inner Indo-European dialect, but we have no means of saying that. Certainly it is not a Dravidian word or an Austric word or any other known language. So it is possible it is a word which existed in the inner Indo-European languages. So there are, but it is not about someone going out and coming back in and bringing this and all that. They're all inside India, different parts, and only the Anus and Druyus went out from India. Actually, the Purus also a section went out, the Mitanni, and much later in time from Indo-Aryan were the Romani or Gypsies who left just 1,000 years ago. So yes, there have been migrations, but I don't think any of them came back and brought new forms in which dominated India.
The first question is, why did the Dasarajana battle happen? Was it purely political fighting, or was there some deep philosophical adversary relationship also going on?
No, it was purely political, because Sudas, first he went westwards in quest of Soma. Then he must have, as they say, got a taste of other areas. So he started, because it specifically mentions that he held that yajna, after which a horse was left loose north, east and west, and so that he could go and conquer in all the directions and acquire riches. So you see, there is no philosophy involved anywhere here. And so people who try to discover philosophical reasons in this are totally out of the way. As I said, neither were the Sudas and his followers good people as compared to the others being bad people. And at the same time, they were the aggressors. The Anus were not the aggressors. They were fighting in their own area, the Punjab area. It is Sudas who went with his army across to them and tried to conquer their area. So you see, there is no philosophy, it is politics. And human nature being what it is, you will find it in every stage of human society and civilization. So it is nothing to be wondered at.
Okay, the second question, Shrikantji, is despite this adversarial relationship, why do Iranians still connect themselves with the word Aryan? I mean, I've heard that even Iran itself comes from Aryan, right? And they still have the Aryan Bandar and all of that. So why do they still have this relationship with this word?
See, the word Arya has been given many meanings, trying to show that it comes from the word wandering, it comes from the meaning agriculture, etc. But basically, we are not concerned about the root from which it came. What is it used as in the Rig Veda? And I have shown that in the Rig Veda, yes, the word Arya is used for the Purus. That is, the Rig Veda is a Puru book, and the Rigvedic people call themselves Arya, and others are called Dasa, whoever they may be. Mainly because their opponents were the Iranians. The word is more, and because the word also is found in the Iranians. So the Dasa word refers to Iranians, but it refers basically to all non-Purus. So you have Puru and Aryan enemies. There are references to Arya and Dasa enemies, which means Puru and non-Puru enemies. I have shown this in great detail. There are many references and they fall in a very clear sense. So what it means is that Arya does not mean any particular thing. It simply means our community versus other communities, our tribal conglomerate versus other tribal conglomerates. So this word was common. The Iranians also called themselves Arya. So the Purus did not call the Anus Arya. They called them Dasa. And the Anus called themselves Arya, and they called the Purus Turya. So you see, each of the Irish people, the word Irish, I don't know, some people dispute that it is connected to the word Aryan, but whatever. If it is, then again, they are calling themselves Arya in a way. So you see, and I always again give a community example of my own. Now there are many types of Saraswats in speaking Konkani. Now originally there are Chitrapur Saraswats and Gaud Saraswats, who are supposed to be Shaiva and Vaishnava. Now formerly, these communities didn't marry among each other, and we use the word Amchigalo, which means belonging to our community. So when a Chitrapur Saraswat uses that word, he means Chitrapur Saraswat. And when he says not Amchigalo, he means Gaud Saraswat. And when the Gaud Saraswat uses the word Amchigalo, he means Gaud Saraswat. And for others, he has other names. So you see, this word does not mean in itself Chitrapur Saraswat or Gaud Saraswat. It simply means our community. So the same way the word Arya does not mean Purus. It does not mean Iranians. It means our community. So in the Rig Veda, it is used for Purus because the Rigvedic people were Purus. In the Avesta, it is used for the Iranians because the Iranian people were I mean, they were also using that word for the Iranians.
Okay, great. So that's wonderful. Last question, Shrikantji. And I know this might throw you off, and I'm not trying to establish any, irrelevant connections, but just trying to ask, is there any connection to Rama or any of his ancestors, significant connection in the Rig Veda?
No, see, I have given in my blog article, Ikshvakus in the Rig Veda, that the Ikshvakus were an eastern people who lived in eastern UP and Bihar. Now, they do not enter into the Rig Veda because they were not part of the Rigvedic culture. They were Indo-European speaking a different language to the east. And their culture was not the ritual culture of the Anus, Druhyus and Purus. It was a culture, more philosophical culture. And when the Vedic culture spread to the area, then their philosophies entered into the Vedic stream in the Upanishads, etc. So Ikshvaku culture was different. But they existed at the same time as the Purus. But they are not mentioned in the Rig Veda. Now, Andamanese people existed for 60,000 years. But what is the oldest book which refers to them? It must be just 200, 300 years ago when the Europeans came here, they went to the Andaman and found them out. The American civilizations existed since long before. But they first entered world records when the Europeans went there and wrote about them. So, you see, people exist long before they are referred to. The Ikshvakus existed long before they appeared in our Indian records. But they did not appear in our Indian records earlier because the earliest Indian records were the records of the Purus to the west.
I'm fascinated by the origin of the Semitic people, not because of any connection they might have with us, but because their exports have had major implications for the whole world, right? And you know what I mean, the religions that have come out of them. So can you either answer now about their origin or some book that you would recommend to know more about their origins, the Semitic people?
No, see, they are completely unconnected, this thing. But now many people have tried to, the linguistic arguments, which I said are fraudulent ones. Now they have claimed that there are words common to Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Semitic, which shows that Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Semitic lived in the same area and had common words for certain things. Now, the two really prominent words are the word for bull, Taurus.
Bekanata, of course. There is a Vedic word, Bekanata, meaning moneylender.
Yeah, it is a Mesopotamian word.
Connected to the Mesopotamian traders.
Yeah. No, that I have dealt with when in the relations that I have shown that the new Rigvedic culture was the culture of the mature Harappans who had trade with Mesopotamia. So that is a different issue. It was trade. Then they are not originally, from one place or something like that. And they are definitely Mesopotamian words. They are not Vedic words which are related to Mesopotamian words. They are words which are borrowed from the Mesopotamian traders. So what they are claiming is that the words for wine and the words for bull, Taurus, are common words. They are found in the Indo-European languages as well as in the Semitic languages, which shows that these two influenced each other. And then they claim also that these were the originally Semitic words. Now, surprisingly, when they give all these fraudulent arguments, they don't really examine the issue. Now, what they're claiming is that, these two words are found in Indo-European languages and they are Semitic words. Absolutely correct. But are they found in all the Indo-European branches? You see, both these words are found only in the 9 branches which are to the west of the Semitic area. That is the languages of Europe, Hittite and all that. They are not found in the 3 branches which are to the east. That is Indo-Aryan, Iranian and Tokharian. These 2 words are not found in these 3 branches. They are found in all the other branches. So what does it show? It shows that the Proto-Indo-Europeans originated in the east. And 9 of those branches migrated westwards, passing the Semitic areas and borrowed those 2 Semitic words from the Semitic people. So it is not a Proto-Indo-European word. It is a word common to those 9 branches which moved from India to Europe and West Asia and passed the Semitic people. So you see, this is when you really examine the linguistic arguments, you come to the truth. So actually there is, I cannot see what, there are people who talk about Nostratic and all. I have not gone into that, so I cannot answer what are all the different language families, how they may be ultimately related and all. That is too esoteric a topic for me. So I don't know how, I don't think there are direct relations between Proto-Semitic and Proto-Indo-European, because most of these things are things which I have written in my books and blogs. See, there is, for example, the blog article, when I was in college, I used to, I had a hobby of learning all the different alphabets of the world. So I knew most of the alphabets, except of course Chinese and Javanese and things like that. And I also had a hobby of learning numbers 1 to 100 in different languages, including Red Indian languages, African languages, Australian Aboriginal languages, and all of them. Now, I had written them all in a book. That book had become yellow and tattered. I wanted to throw it away, but I thought all that work I took during my college days, I shouldn't just throw it away. I'll write an article on it. And I started an article, India's unique place in the world of numbers and numerals. And while I was doing it, unbelievably, I found a super proof, linguistic proof, that the Aryans or Indo-European languages originated in India. Because all the number systems of the world fall in certain categories. There are decimal languages and V-decimal languages. And in decimal languages, there are 4 stages. The first stage is represented by languages like Chinese, etc. In India, we have Santali. Second stage is represented by languages like Turkish and all that. And you find it in India also. In, for example, Sinhalese. No, not in Sinhalese, sorry. You find it in what is known as spoken Sinhalese today. Obviously, it is a very ancient language which has remained alive and no one has realized it. Spoken Sinhalese contains words like Vatura for water, which is related to English water and Hittite water. But people have decided that Sinhalese came from Sanskrit. So no one really analyzes Sinhalese words separately. So that is where the mistake comes. As I said, there were other Indo-European languages which have to be examined. Now, the Sinhalese language has this system like Turkish and others, the spoken Sinhalese. And then you get the third stage, which is found in all the Dravidian languages of the world and all the other 11 branches of Indo-European languages except Indo-Aryan. And then you find the fourth stage, which is found in modern Indo-Aryan languages, which is the most complicated and difficult stage of all. So I have given that in detail in my article. So then where were these 4 stages? Where did they develop? Obviously in India, because you find the second, third and fourth stage in India. Sanskrit and Tokharian, which was one of the first to leave, that also falls in the second stage, along with spoken Sinhalese. And then all the other 11 branches except Tokharian fall, I should say 10 branches actually, all fall in the third category. And in Sinhalese, the written Sinhalese language also falls in the third category. And all the Dravidian languages fall in the third category, which shows that when that third category of words was forming in North India, Sinhalese left that area, all the Indo-European branches left India, and the Dravidian languages were also influenced by that. Or maybe it was a common development. But when the North Indian languages developed into the fourth stage, all these other people had departed. So we have the second, third and fourth stage in India, which proves that, and again, why do all the other 11 branches outside India have the same stage as the Dravidian languages? So that shows that they were all in India at the time of the third stage. So here, when you examine different subjects, you come across new and unexpected proof. So that is one subject which, for example, is a separate article by itself, like the one on the elephant. So, I mean, these are side topics which give strong weight to the out of India theory.
You know, when you mentioned that Sudas went out in search of Soma to get it from Afghanistan. Whatever I have read about Soma, it says it's one of the fundamental offerings in Vedic practices and the yagyas. So when he goes out in the search of Soma, is it purely political or does it have a spiritual and some other angle to it?
Parallel with the Europeans coming to India for spices. They knew about spices since the Roman times because the Romans used to import spices and they drained their gold reserves in trying to buy Indian spices. So it was a very valued thing known to the Europeans since ancient times. But it was just 500, 600 years that when the Arabs closed the routes to India, that they set out to find a path to India in quest of the spices. So it was not a new thing. They knew about it. And similarly, the Kurus knew about Soma because it was an import from the northwest. But they did not, it was a rare material. And they had to pass through it had to come through the Anu territories. So Sudas set out in search of the Soma. Now you say Soma, I don't know how spiritual exactly the Soma ritual is because, I won't comment on that. But the thing is that the Soma ritual had died out. It is a purely Rigvedic ritual which started somewhere after, Soma became common. Now, in the Rigveda, the Soma is known from ancient times. But when it tells you about the places where Soma is found, these places are mentioned only in the new books. And all these places are in the northwestern Afghanistan. So you see, even the Rigveda was not in any suspense about where Soma is from. And after some time, when they moved into Uttar Pradesh and eastward, and they lost that, Soma cult became redundant. So most people afterwards didn't even know what Soma was. Mostly it is claimed to be a species of ephedra, but it's not necessary to go deeply into that point. Whether they were not allowing or what, I don't know. He must have decided to go and get it directly. At any rate, in the new books, there are references to people of Gandhara, known as Gandharvas. And they prevent people from taking the Soma from that. So it is possible that some people in the northwest must not have been allowing it. But the Sudas hymn does not say so directly. It only says that he went westwards in quest of Soma.
What books to read? Now, of course, for contemporary writers like Shrikant, you can have Google and go to his blog site and so on, you'll find out. There is one book that deserves mention here that you will not find so easily. It has the same realistic and commonsensical approach that Shrikant has. It is about the Rig Veda, not about the Indo-European, but about the chronology of the Rig Veda. And it ends up concluding entirely in the same sense as Shrikant has. It is this book by Umapada Sen from the 1970s. It's about the astronomy in the Rig Veda. So it's a different part of the Rig Vedic evidence. And so he concludes, you see, to an era of about 3,500 to 2000 BC, which is far more modest than all the, well, what shall I say, high-flown Hindu alternatives about Mahabharata in 5,500 BC and so on. No, so it's much more modest, much more realistic. At the same time, however, it is a clear refutation of the Aryan invasion theory. You see, if the Rig Veda was being written in 3000 BC, obviously the Rig Vedic writers cannot have entered India in 1500 BC. The Rig Vedic era by Umapada Sen.
So in basic your hypothesis, you say that Yayati and all of his descendants are a part of the lunar dynasty, and you have the Ikshwakus who are in the interior, based around the Ayodhya area, who are the Ikshwaku, the solar dynasty. My question is, there is in the Jain tradition, you have a lot of the Tirthankaras who are a part of the Ikshwaku dynasty. So is there any study which has been done, or if you have done any study, which is to, like you have done with the Avesta, on the part of comparing the Jain chronology and whatever is available through the Jain texts or the Jain tradition, and comparing that with the Vedic tradition?
Yeah, that is what I have said, that Bihar was a place where all kinds of philosophies evolved, whether it was Upanishadic philosophies in the courts of Janaka, or it was Buddhism or Jainism or agnostic and atheistic beliefs. If all kinds of philosophical systems originated there. The Rig Veda basically is not philosophical, though there are some very interesting hymns by Dirghatamas, for example, and Conrad has said much about them. But on the whole, it is not a philosophical text. It is a very karmakand sort of text. And very, the priests are praise the kings for giving them gifts. Like, courtiers praise the king for giving them gifts. So spiritualism is, in my mind, very much a small part. And it is there in certain parts. But there are, for example, there is a hymn, The Gambler's Lament, which teaches, which tries to tell us don't gamble. And it is in the form of a gambler who reveals how he's been destroyed by gambling. So you see, there are all kinds of themes in the Rig Veda. Some of them are moral, social. Most of them are, just hymns in praise of God or descriptions of rituals. So everything is there in the Rig Veda, but philosophy is hardly there. Yes, in the 10th book, there are the Nasadiya Sukta and others, which are very highly philosophical hymns. Let me add that. Maybe by that time they had been influenced by the East also, I don't know. And Ikshwakus, I think earlier someone asked about Ayodhya. I forgot to mention that in the Ramayana, the list of kings of Ayodhya, now it has certain very important names missing, like Prasadasyu, Purukutsa, etc. And in the Puranas, they are mentioned as Ikshvaku kings. And in the Rig Veda, they are found as Trikshi kings to the northwest. So you see, what this means is at the time of Mandhata, who was a king of Ayodhya, he went to help the Purus in the northwest, and then after he came back, another new dynasty starting from him settled down in the northwest. And that is those are the kings like Purukutsu and Prasadasyu, who are the Ikshvaku kings mentioned in the Rig Veda. So we have now evidence that there must have been a Ikshvaku kingdom to the east, because Mandhata appears from the east into the Rigvedic area and leaves behind a new generation and goes back. So you see, that is how the Ikshvakus have their place in the Rig Veda. But the Ikshvaku culture itself was not following the Vedic thing. Whatever you may find in the Valmiki Ramayana, which is written much later. See, the trouble with all these things, as I said, is that Vedic literature goes back, as I said, the earliest things go back to 3000 BC. And Vedic literature was there by till 1000 BC or other Vedic texts, before the Buddhist period. So whatever, even the Puranas were written and the epics were written in Mauryan times. So all these later texts, the Jain and Buddhist texts many of them were composed before the Puranas were actually written down. So still they don't go back into Vedic times. So there, I don't know how you can connect them, except that it shows that those cultures were already there in the East, at the same time as the Vedic culture was flourished in the West. But how you can connect them, like some people try to connect the word Rishabha. It may just be a common word. Like, for example, in the Rig Veda, there is a reference to a king called Sushravas, who fights a battle against 20 kings. But that is just one reference in a verse. We can't reconstruct history from it. But in the Avesta, you find a king called Hausrava, which is the same thing as Sushravas. And his name in modern Parsi is Khushru. But that has no connection with the Sushravas of the Rig Veda in the first book. At the same time, Buddha, the Buddha of the East, has no connection with Buddha Atreya, a rishi in the Rig Veda, and Baudra, a rishi in the Avesta, a composer in the Avesta. So you see that same name could flourish in different areas. So it's not necessary that Rishabha means that he was part of the Rigvedic culture. He was part of the Eastern spiritual culture.
Is there any particular publication you can recommend for us to refer to read the Rig Vedas in Hindi and Sanskrit?
Well, I have read many translations of Rig Veda, and many of them, contain, only when you read all, you come across the correct translation. Because, for example, the reference to Kavi Chayaman, Wilson has correctly translated it. Whereas all the other scholars translate it in different ways. So you don't even know that there is a person called Kavi Chayaman who's being referred to in that hymn. So you see, I cannot recommend any one particular translation. You should go through all the translations. At the same time, much of the Rig Veda is ritualistic, prayers to Indra and descriptions of the Soma ritual and all. What you will get by going through them is a bit difficult to say. So it depends upon how you research it. So my method has been, take some keywords, find out where they are located in the Rig Veda, and then you arrive at the historical conclusion from it. So that has been the main way in which I have arrived at my history.
Why are the archaeologically identified cities of Rakhigadi, Lothal, Dholavira, Bhirana not found in our Veds or Purans? It's always intrigued me while we find all the names of river cities, but these archaeological sites have not been mentioned. Could you please throw light on them?
Yeah, because you see the Puranas, as I said, were written in Mauryan times, whereas these are very much older cities. So, for example, we know that the Vedas are, the geography shows that the Rig Veda was composing the entire area over which the Indus Valley or Harappan civilization was spread. But now, how will you find exact correspondence between the archaeology and the Vedic text? It is very difficult because they had not set out to provide us with such examples. They were doing their own work. So it depends on how far we are able to find such. For example, I have given that two words, Mesopotamian words, Bekanata and Mana. Now they are accepted by scholars as Mesopotamian or Babylonian words pertaining to trade. This shows that the Vedic people in that period, book 8, which is a new book, at that period they were in contact with and they traded with the Babylonians of Mesopotamia. So what does it mean? How could the Rig Veda people in Haryana have traded with them? So it was actually, it was from the Harappan cities that this trade took place. So there we find any indirect clues. I cannot, if we do not find exact, that this word and this word is corresponding to this and all that, you do find, for example, kundas which have been identified as yajna kundas. So it depends on how far you can identify them.
Yahweh, the Judaic god. Is it somewhere similar to Shiva, because they can't pronounce sir, so they pronounce it as her. So Yahweh, and because you said that there was an emigration out from here, so that is one question I have. Secondly, because in the Vedas there's a proto Shiva, Vedic god, which was Rudra, and it is all about destruction and all about destroying whenever there is too much of wrongdoings. So can that be taken as Yahweh, Shiva in the Judaic god?
Actually, see, this Rudra has many epithets. One of them is Shiva, which means Shubha. That is auspicious. So, but if you see, there are two references in the Rig Veda, two contentious references to Shishna Deva. Now, whether that means people who are addicted to sex, or does it mean people who are worshippers of the linga? That is a much debated issue. But if it is the latter, it means that the Rigvedic people did not worship the linga, and we know that they didn't. So, but we know that from archaeological discoveries in the interior of India that the linga was worshipped all over India in the interior. So it was a part of the interior religions of India, not a part of the Rigvedic. So you see, Shiva afterwards, when the Vedic religion spread all over India, all the local deities were incorporated into the not Vedic Puranic, because in the Puranas already the Vedic gods had been transformed and adapted. And afterwards, when it spread all over India, the main two gods of the Purana, Shiva and Vishnu, all the local deities were attributed as avatars of Shiva or Vishnu. So we have Vithala, who is the avatar of Vishnu, and we have, say, for example, Malhari, Martan, who is supposed to be a incarnation of Shiva. So all the goddesses were made incarnations of the great Devi, and all the other male deities were made into reincarnations of Vishnu or Shiva, and they were all incorporated into one whole. So you see what exactly was there first and not. It's not necessary that it should correspond.
Yeah, this is regarding any kind of evidence of contact with Vedic Indians or Indo-European speakers, to be accurate, in the Assyrian text, because what we find is that Assyrians had a lot of conflict with the Hittites who are to the west. But do the Assyrian records have any information about contact with people from the east speaking Indo-European?
No, not until the Mitanni people went and formed the kingdom there. Then it is the Mitanni people who have Indo-Aryan words, Vedic words actually, and Vedic names. So that is when, and that is when the Mitanni people went in. I have shown that the Mitanni people must have gone in the period of the new Rigvedic books, which is somewhere after 2500 BC. And that is the exact time when peacocks, elephants, and the Indian buffalo, the Indian zebu cattle are found in West Asia. So it is obvious that these were taken by the Mitanni people there. So that is when the Assyrians came into contact with the people who originated in India, not maybe directly with India. And we have in these two Babylonian words in the Rig Veda, which shows that the trade contact between Babylonia and the Indus civilization actually represented trade contact between the new Rigvedic people and the Babylonians. But a contact which was not very prominent, it just incidentally appears in these two words, both of which are connected with trade. Dekanata means the money lender, and mana is a measure of unit of measure. So both of these would be required for traders.
So are you planning to do any comprehensive analysis of the Sinhali language? Because as you mentioned, they have some archaic words like Batura for the water, which is found in the western branches, and Hittite, so which is very interesting. So, and I would love to sort of find out what more of the vocabulary that they contain, which does not come from the Indo-Aryan. Are you planning to do any comprehensive analysis in the near future?
See, for that, I think I'm a bit too old to start learning a new language, especially a very unknown one like Sinhalese. Like I had decided when I retired 2 years ago that now I'm going to learn 3 languages. One is Kannada, because people from Konkani speakers half know Kannada. Also because I worked in Central Bank, I half know Gujarati. And because we know Hindi, we half know Urdu. So I decided I would study Urdu, Gujarati and Kannada in detail. But somehow that move has never come, although 2 years have passed. So I don't see how I can study the Sinhalese language and not only study it, but arrive at all these very, deep researches and analysis. I don't think I can do that. But some Sinhalese scholars should certainly do it. Because the culture of the Anus, Purus and Grihas was not philosophical, as I said. It was the culture of the Ikshvakus to the east. So the movement of philosophy was from east to west, but within India. Those who went outside India before that, they did not take the philosophies with them. Though I believe Conrad has found certain elements in Greek and Hindu mythology, but not precisely philosophy.
Even in that framework, the last paper which has been really popular called the Narasimhan paper from the David Reich and also a few geneticists from India. And what I find confusing and surprising is a lot of people actually don't even go read the paper themselves, because recently, a few months ago, I started reading the paper, and they have not the actual published paper, but they also published a supplementary report with it. And that report is actually very interesting, especially the section on the South Asians, because there are 3 points very, very clear that they make based on their DNA comparison. So and I know Talagere also did some detailed analysis in his recent book addressed to Tony Joseph about the DNA stuff as well. So as we know that in the Swat Valley, they found I think near about 100 ancient DNA from 1200 BC to 800 BC. So and in this entire sort of called a circus of Aryan invasion, so all the people who believe on it. So that should be the time where the Aryans are supposed to be mixing heavily with the Indians. But and look at this. So there are about 100 ancient DNAs, and they make a clear-cut observation in the supplementary report, and they don't say much about it in the original report. But what they say is that the central that the steppe cline is not included in the modern Indian cline, and the steppe cline and the Swat Valley ancient DNA, they are completely off cline. So there we have our clear answer. So the one must ask, how did they end up actually making a conclusion that the Aryans somehow entered India? So and in the very same paragraph, what they say is that so they sort of invented a population which does not exist and did not exist in India, which did not exist in the steppe. They have got no ancient DNA sample, but because they were working with the steppe hypothesis, so they say that we hypothesize a ghost population that once existed on the steppes and also existed within South Asia, and they too mixed with each other. So that ghost population came in to South Asia and started mixing with everyone, and which is not found in the ancient DNA. So this is something I think everyone should just go and read that section. And so this is the entire basis of the Aryan invasion, even in the genetics now. So there is no archaeological record, there is no textual record, and the genetics is inventing a ghost population. So I guess that explains a lot.
Dr. L says Yahweh means he who is, according to the Bible. But this is a folk etymology. It comes from Arabic HYW, Yahweh, to move in the sky, to storm, a Bedouin storm god. So not very unlike the Rudra of the Vedic deities.
Well, I mean, you've said it very well. You see, Yahweh appears to Moses in the burning bush when he is staying as a refugee with a Bedouin tribe, the Midianites, who are Arabic. And so, unlike in Egypt, where he comes from, where the sun is always shining, there in the desert, they have storms. And so they have a storm god. And so, you see, apparently he got familiar with this, and he was busy with this mentally. And so when he saw this strange natural phenomenon of the burning bush, which is because of an ethereal oil that catches fire under the sun rays, this became real for him. And so that's where Yahweh, it's basically an Arabic storm deity. The word Yahweh, but not in that meaning, but in the basic meaning of the storm, to move in the sky, is also found in the Quran. But so it's not found in Hebrew. And so that's why the Hebrews were, tempted to make a folk etymology on the spot. But so I stand by the natural Arabic explanation. See, the fact at any rate is that the word is not related to any Sanskrit word, like some people claim that it's related to Yahweh or something. That's coincidental. There may be sound resemblances, but the Hebrew Arabic word is not related to Sanskrit. However, the concept is more or less related. I mean, most ancient peoples, you see, faced with the phenomenon of storms, had a storm god. And so whether he's called Rudra or Indra or Yahweh or whatever, the concept is more or less the same. Similar with the black stone in the Kaaba. Some people say, oh, it was a Shiva temple. No, it was not. But nevertheless, it has a great resemblance to the Shiva cult in India, which is why Arab traders went to worship at the Somnath temple on the coast, because they thought that essentially it was the same god as the one worshipped in the Kaaba.
Like, for example, the Linga worship is found all over the world. And in fact, in pre-Islamic Arabia, the Kaaba itself was a kind of a Linga worship stone. So you see, these are things which are found in pre-Abrahamic times in many parts of the world. And it is not necessary that it went from India to there or came from there to here. These are common human religious tendencies.